Welcome back, everybody, to the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. I'm Grandmaster Robert Hess. Alongside me is my good friend, the legendary commentator, Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky. Danya, it's been a long week because I've been missing the Rapid Chess Championship.
I know. Can you believe that the first week of the RCC was last week? That was last weekend. And now we have this weekend and we have another week. And we're going to have so many more weeks like this. And last week was absolutely epic. I was watching some of the clips, Robert. If this is going to be anything like last week, we are in for another roller coaster ride, and that's why we're here.
Oh, we certainly are in for a treat, as we always are. And the good news is we don't have to schedule plans for our weekends anymore. We know what we're doing. Nope. Everybody here knows what they'll be watching. It is the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. And Danya, I think without further ado, we should remind everybody the wild ride we had last week. Okay, so... Oh, I didn't realize that you can't play A8.
Takes Rook D2 or Rook B2, and then you just take the pawn on B4.
King of 6, Rook B4, Bishop E7. Only chance. If you go Rook 6 B4, Bishop E7.
But then Rook B8, and then Black gives up an exchange, and he's got chances. Vlad is done in 4 seconds. How does he win?
Oh my, he doesn't know what to do. Bishop E7. There's chances.
Take E7.
Play Rook B1. Play Rook B1. If you play Rook B1,
Rook 28.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That didn't just happen. Oh. Oh my God.
I've never seen anything like this in my life.
Oh, and he is just destroyed emotionally right now.
Oh my God.
How?
What in the world? I didn't even see the mate.
Me neither.
Rook F2, Bishop coming to D3. Fabi with 15 seconds. When he goes Rook D1, pinning the queen, Queen E3, pinning the bishop.
Wait, King G2.
Oh my goodness.
And Queen H3. Oh my goodness, his queen's coming in.
It's not over. His queen's coming either to E6 or to H6. How is he doing this? 15 seconds. This is anybody's
Queen
game.
E7.
This is a time scramble.
Take the Rook.
Oh my goodness. Take the Rook with Bishop B4. Fabi saw it immediately after he played it. What's going on? 8 seconds. 7 seconds. Who's gonna win this G4? Pinning the queen. Bishop F2.
2 pawns. D6. Go.
Oh my goodness. D6. Push it.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness.
Queen. He gave a queen.
He promotes. He promoted.
But he's got
3 seconds. He's got 3 seconds.
Take the
pawn. Can he get the pawn? He does.
Take the pawn.
Take it. Take the pawn.
There he goes.
Oh my goodness. And it's gonna be a draw.
Oh my God.
But still, how did he say that? Fabi's gonna be annoyed with himself that he didn't win that. Let me tell you.
Oh, Bishop D5 or Queen D3 is hanging.
Yeah.
Really dangerous.
6 seconds for Kirill.
Okay, you gotta move Kirill.
A4. Now he wants Fabi to take so that he can put a rook on D2.
Yes, and that's not
2
good.
2 seconds. Fabi's gonna move. He's gonna lose the time.
Oh, he barely got the move of a Rook D2.
Rook D2. Rook D2. Rook A4. Bishop D5. Bishop D5 is the winning move.
Huge.
Bishop D5.
Does he see it?
2 seconds.
1 second.
He's gonna move.
Oh my gosh! He lost in time. He just didn't move.
Oh my God! The position where Fabi resigns after Bishop D5. Are you kidding me?
His feet were stuck in cement and he couldn't budge, and he doesn't get a move off. And Fabiano Caruana in a lost position.
He couldn't get out of the quicksand.
And those were your highlights from the first week of the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. Danya, here we have our leaderboard, and it's Jan Nepomniachtchi. He didn't make his way into the highlights, but he really stole the show a week ago.
I think it's a good thing that he didn't make his way into the highlights. It was really smooth. I mean, it wasn't always very smooth, but he was classy, he was solid, he was consistent, and really important to win that first tournament. He gets up on top of the leaderboard with 10.
That's right. He took the lion's share of the Grand Prix points, and that's what's at stake every single week, in addition to the prize money. And speaking of this event, the prize money, the what's at stake, we do want to thank our sponsors of this event, because the Rapid Chess Championship would not be possible without Coinbase. So whether you're looking to make your first crypto purchase or you're an experienced trader, Coinbase has you covered. Earn crypto by learning about crypto with Coinbase Earn, explore DeFi, and Web3 with Coinbase Wallet. Get exclusive rewards when you spend with Coinbase Card, and much more. Learn more at coinbase.com/chess and get $10 in Bitcoin when you sign up and verify your account. And for now, Donnie and I will take a quick breather, but when we return, it will be the start of week 2 here from the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. And we return here with some of the contestants on screen. Danya, some familiar faces to us and to the world at large.
Pretty weak assemblage of players there. I don't really know who that guy in the middle is. I don't really know who any of them are really now that I think of it. Are they grandmasters?
Actually, they might not be grandmasters because some of them are considered super grandmasters. So we don't even want to sell them short as the action gets underway here in the Rapid Chess Championship. But round one has begun. We saw the likes of Fabiano Caruana, Vida Gujrathi, Wesley So, Arjun Erigaisi, Aryan Tari, and the who's who of chess.
Right. And oh, by the way, we've got some dude named Parham Maksudlu up on the screen. He's got the black pieces against Polina Shuvalova, Russian phenom, and I think she just is in the process of verifying her grandmaster title. Very, very talented.
Yes, and I mean, she's taking on another very talented player in Parham Maksudlu, and that's the thing about this event. If you get off to a slow start, it doesn't get any easier because you continue to play very strong grandmaster after strong grandmaster. And with the white pieces here in game one, Danya, this is the first pawn tension we've seen all game. And that now after e5, rather than taking any pawns in the center, the bishop on g7, not the best piece, but it's all coming down to tension surrounding the d4 square.
Right. I think they're actually following the Caruana Carlsen game from the recent Tata Steel tournament. There was some tournament in this line. Some game in this line. I don't remember what it was. Now, black with a pretty serious dilemma here. B takes c6 or queen takes c6. BC keeps the pressure on the b2 pawn, but somewhat damages the pawn structure. The immediate queen takes b2, Robert, doesn't strike me as an option because of bishop takes d5.
That's right, because the knight on e4 is loose, and you would have been down a piece to begin with. So it said pawn takes, queen c1. And Danya, when you see a move like queen c1, we know exactly where that bishop on e3 is trying to go.
Yeah, it's going from e2 to h6. Bishop is potentially going to h6. And it might seem counterproductive to trade off black's bishop because currently black's bishop is kind of, 0 out of 2 on arrows. It's currently biting on granite on e5, but it's more about weakening black's king than anything else.
That's right. And you may think, right, that you want to undouble your double pawns with c takes d4, but after c4, c4, your pawn on c6 is targeted from the queen on c1. It opens up the c3 square for the knight coming out from b1, and there's just going to be some pressure that black's going to have to deal with for a long time, in particular because you can't push that second pawn to c5, and that's going to be a backwards pawn and a target for the long haul.
Right. And another decision for Parham, where does he develop his light squared bishop? I mean, bishop g4 comes to mind. But the hilarious thing is I can play h3 and you're never afraid of bishop takes f3 because the knight on e4 is simply trapped. So as good as the knight on e4 looks, it's both a blessing and a curse, on top of which white can play knight bd2 and essentially trade it off the board. Okay, Parham takes on d4, but I don't think he's too happy about this decision.
No, and look at it. He's down a full minute on the clock right now. So for Polina here, she knows the position. She's more comfortable at the opening. And knight c3 is an obvious next move. And then what is black's plan? Because that pawn on c6, that's a target. It's a weakness. And you can't play c5, as I was mentioning before, because all of white's pieces are staring in that direction.
And there's your answer. Parham doing what he can to open the position up, trying to get that f file open so he can orchestrate some counterplay, perhaps against white's knight on f3. He would love for Polina to take on f6. He'll probably recapture with maybe he'll take with a pawn and then try to go f5 and reinforce the knight. At first, I thought he would take with the bishop, but now I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure I love the decision to take on f6. As you're pointing out, it opens up some lines for black's pieces, and the bishop on g7 will be better. If you say e takes f6 followed by f5, I really like that. The bishop on g7 will see some new life. f4 would become a threat. The d4 pawn isolated, well defended for now, but maybe you can remove some of the guards. So Danya, I agree with you that e takes f6, a surprising decision, but it looks like a good move.
Yeah, and I think Polina should have probably kept the tension there, kept her pawn on e5 to keep the bishop out of commission. But Parham taking pretty long things here. Yep, he takes f6. We're probably going to see either knight c3 or knight bd2. But as you indicated, Parham could go f5. He could make a move such as rook e8. And it just seems that his pieces are starting to see new life.
Right. And I mean, white still will have that pressure down the C file, but all of a sudden black has something to play for himself. So Polina well ahead in the clock. That's the good news. And there's still plenty of life left. So maybe we can check out some other games as well.
Absolutely. Shall we go from the top and take a quick look at some of those games, or anybody that you're particularly interested in?
Well, I mean, Hikaru Nakamura is playing, Fabiano Caruana, Vidit Gujrathi. I don't know how I'm supposed to choose.
All right, fine. We'll go with Hikaru.
If we must.
If we must, yeah, we'll go with Hikaru. Okay. So let me pull up that game of his.
Okay, and we did just see a trade on C3 in this one, by the way. But, here we have Hikaru with the black piece against Bogdan Diak. So that is a very strong opponent in the first round, Danya. And there is quite a bit of tension in this position. The rook on C1, the queen on C7. Usually rooks win stare downs on an open line against a queen. And now after bishop takes C5, here's the big question. I don't think Hikaru can take on C5 with the queen. He takes the pawn. But is the isolated pawns, we'll have one on A6, one on C5. Does that make black's position worse, or is everything okay here?
I think everything is okay. There's a countervailing factor, which is the fact that white has pushed F3, and that might not seem like a significant weakness, but it does curb the bishop's activity just a little bit, and it creates potential problems down this diagonal. Black might park his queen on B6. Honestly, I think that this game is very likely to end in a draw. Now, Bogdan could simply castle here. Clinging to the D5 pawn is not a recipe for success. I think Hikaru can simply take it anyway. And if you think about it, takes, there's queen E5 check, winning the bishop back. And this also seems like total liquidation and quite possibly an early draw. And, Hikaru is probably not against a draw. Let's not forget that Bogdan is 2670. He's got the white pieces. And, this is a pretty long event.
No, that's true. And, I think in an event like this with 9 rounds, you respect every opponent that you're playing. Of course, you can't force a win out of thin air.
Hikaru accompanied bishop takes d5 with a draw offer, which I would imagine will be accepted. Now, I've played Bogdan a lot in Blitz, and he declines almost all of my draw offers. But there's a small, imperceptible difference between who is offering a draw here.
Yeah, and I will say that right now, the time situation, 6 minutes may seem like an eternity, but when you're down on the clock against Hikaru Nakamura, that's when the trouble only begins. So I think he's going to think for a bit, see if and he played on Queen C3, showing no fear.
The guy does not take draws, like at all. And Queen B6.
I respect it. I don't know if it's going to pay off here, but I respect it. And the reason why is look at black's pawns on the queen side, A6, C5. Those are split pawns, isolated. They could become targets. The issue for white is that the pawn structure is B2, A3 rather than A2, B3, for example. Yeah. So this pawn on B2 on a semi-open line is directly targeted and forever going to be a weakness.
Yeah, that's the big problem, pawn on B2. And Hikaru just has to find the right arrangement, which is going to allow him to defend these pawns. I would probably go rook A8, not a glamorous looking move, but I mean, now you got to defend C5. You can also probably drop your bishop back to E6, and you've got mutually assured destruction going on. Queen takes C5. There's always going to be queen takes B2. And I agree with you, a gutsy decision, no doubt, but declining Hikaru's draws pay off about 7.3% of the time, probably less. So I would have taken that draw, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, although this position does remain equal, so nothing too exciting on the board at the moment, likely to be a draw nonetheless.
Agreed. So maybe we should shop around a little bit, take a look at some of the other games. We have Fabi playing on, I think, technically the top board.
Okay, and he's got a great position from the white side.
Nice position.
I'll gladly go shopping if you're buying, because in this position, I'm buying Fabiano's chances. Look at the placement of the pawns. That pawn on C6, that's a backwards pawn. That's a target. So white would love just double rooks and go after the bishop on H2, slicing through the position. It is a great piece over here. So I do think that Fabiano is for choice, and yet the eval bar says only slightly worse for black.
I'd like to solve the puzzle. The pawn on C6 is a weakness. Cue Wheel of Fortune theme.
I was like, where are you going with that?
I was not actually going anywhere. That was terrible.
So you're just like the pawn, not going anywhere is what you're saying.
I mean, what else is there to be said? There's nothing more to be said. Now, one thing I'd point out here is bishop G5 is a possibility. And the point, Robert, could be to induce F4 and then drop the bishop back. And now white is the one with something to worry about on E4. But instead, black going A4, trying to carve out that C4 square for his knight. Classic technique. If white's pawn was on A2 here, white wouldn't have to worry at all. White could ignore that. Now Fabi has to figure out a way to deal with this. Maybe he takes the knight, but that would involve creating a long-term weakness on the dark squares, especially on the king side.
Although what he can try to do is bishop takes d6, and b4, shutting the bishop down towards the queen side, and that pawn on c6 is never going anywhere. So you're right that the white king in the corner looks a bit unsafe, but there are some practical issues that black needs to deal with. And instead, he takes on a4, and I thought knight c4 was going to be the yeah.
I was sure knight c4 was going to be the response, but instead, black pre-moving ba. But this defeats the whole purpose, Robert, because now the knight can never get to c4. I assume maybe black wants to go knight b5 and target the pawn that way, but this just doesn't have the same aura to it.
And if queen g5, there's rook c5, and that queen is quickly getting into some trouble. So that's why the queen slides back to h7. And I'm with you, Danya, that knight b5 is coming, but it seems like white should be able to maneuver the pieces and deal with that threat.
Yeah, knight d3. Any knight move can be met with a rook c4, counter targeting the a4 pawn. It looks like Fabi, he's got a nice position. I don't think it's anything crazy, but he is definitely nursing an advantage as he goes knight d3. Another player that I'm always very interested in whenever he's playing anywhere is Peter Svidler.
Oh, yeah.
Peter is a favorite of mine. I think he's a crowd favorite, and I love to see Peter do well. I also love to see Benjamin Bach do well, so I'm a little bit torn. And this looks like a Grunfeld, which anybody who knows Peter will know that that is not a surprise.
Not a surprise at all. But what is surprising about this position, Danya, is this pin along the D file. I'm wondering, and queen c4 was just played by Svidler. I was wondering if white can sacrifice the queen by taking this knight on e7 and give up the queen for a rook and a minor piece and that really dangerous passed pawn. But I guess the bishop on f4 is hanging, but then there's rook d8 check. So
rook d8 check and e8 queen. So you have to go rook e8. That's the problem, I think.
And then after bishop d6 is just, bishop h6 at the end.
Oof.
Oof. Oh, I was so close. That passed pawn looks so dangerous.
Yeah, but I'm blockading with the rook. And if you only had a light squared bishop that just magically appeared on c6, Benjamin going h3, very zen move. But now the knight can jump out to f5. And, this pawn on d6 is classic example of both a strength and a weakness. It is weak, but it can also get very dangerous.
That's why we don't wander too far away from our friends, because that pawn on d6 would love another pawn to reinforce it, but that's not happening. So if you could backtrack that pawn to d5 and then put your pawn c4, a connected passed pawn, and we think, didn't my coach tell me to push my passed pawn when I can? The answer is not always. And here that pawn d6, bishop f8 can happen, rook a to d8, and the knight on f3, dominated by that pawn on f6, 3 squares away, the knight isn't playing its part in this position.
No, and what's more is that if you play g4, which Benjamin did just as I was saying, and I think Svidler can take on d6 here, and he does. Bishop takes d6. I think there's just rook a d8 or bishop f8. Yep. And you have to be careful there. Bishop takes d6. No, you have to play rook a d8. If you play bishop f8 here, white has the move queen f4 winning on the spot because the queen unpins itself and the bishop defends the queen. So you actually have to go rook a d8. But man, oh man, this is exactly what's happening. Now, if queen f4, Robert, black takes and wins the rook on d1. Mm-hmm.
I was about to say exactly that. It's an important lesson that you're not just pinning the bishop to the queen, but also that rook on d1 is quite loose. So queen f4 does not allow white to survive here. And if that you don't have that move, aren't you just going to lose that bishop and be down at least a pawn?
Yeah, I mean, and your position is in shambles. Your queenside pawn structure, your king is weak now. Black's king is not the safest either now that f6 has been played, but Svidler is more than happy to pay that price. One idea I came up with is queen e3, but this is a complete paper tiger. I mean, after queen e8 check, it's just one check. Black covers it easily, and this is virtually resignable.
And you get the first check in, but black's king is actually safer than white's in many of these positions. This is exactly what's happening. And I would agree with you. It looks terrible for white, but now we're into the blitz portion of the rapid game. However, it's Peter Svidler who is well up on the clock. And if we remember his success in the Speed Chess Championship, no, he didn't win his match, but against Hikaru Nakamura, he gave him an even fight heading into the bullet.
Oh, and what exacerbates this even further, queen takes a7, boom, queen f4 wins on the spot. Will Svidler find it? Queen f4 and Benjamin resigns. And he does. Yeah, brilliant play. And look at the speed. 3:21. He's got plenty of time.
Peter Svidler, just one of the absolute best players on the planet for decades. And he's not going to miss one move tactics like this, but it was really much more. He put the pressure on the d6 pawn. He wins this game and he'll go to a good start with 1 out of 1.
He's so humble, and he's such a class act that people don't realize how much of an absolute beast he is and has been for many decades. Gata, by the way, has lost his game. I'm not sure to whom, but we'll definitely update the results as they come in. Who catches your eye of the games that are remaining? Robson, there's so many interesting players.
There's a game between Alexianko and Jeffrey Zhang, and just on paper, that matchup is one that is hard not to appreciate, but it looks like I think that Bilodeau, that is Alexianko, he is in the driver's seat with the white pieces in that matchup. So I do think that Jeffrey, he's always one of the top competitors, no matter what the competition is. But right now, he's facing a very angry, I guess, Alexianko after last week's loss on time in the knockout.
I would have been banging my desk all throughout the week, still banging it in preparation for today. And he looks like he means business. He's got an exchange. Now, Jeffrey has established a very strong knight on e5, but the open h file compounds Black's problems. I mean, Rook E3 here is pretty interesting, but instead Queen F4, switching to the F file. I don't know about that. Knight H5, Jeffrey starting to unwind his tentacles here.
And just take a knight back. Hey, look how quickly Jeffrey made that decision. Trade bishops, bring the knight to f6. And the knight on e5 is great. The e4 pawn is loose. And the eval bar keeps swinging. Like, it's still going to be better for white, but it's going from a huge advantage to just a moderate advantage. And here comes Black's queen. Danya, all of a sudden, Jeffrey, since we tuned in, he was down in exchange. Now he's attacking a3. He's attacking the knight on d4. If the knight on d4 moves, c2 is going to fall. If c2 falls, then b3 is also under attack.
There we go.
And
it's a
e4
chain reaction. And
oh
look
my
at the
gosh.
clock situation. Now the clock situation equalizing. This move, Queen F4, I think Alexianko kind of went off the rails. By the way, we don't have to switch to that game, but Bogdan Dac is about to lose to Hikaru. He's got 30 seconds and a worse endgame. And who knew? But his decision to decline the draw, well, it backfired.
I think maybe even he knew that was a possibility.
Yeah.
But
what is... Okay, Rook D1, though. Interesting move, attacking the base on d6. Knight takes e4 can still, I think, be met with rook takes d6, slicing off the defender of Black's rook.
And you have to watch out for queen takes f7 as well, but you can argue the king can slide to the h file, and with the knight forks on the horizon, that it could be a possibility as well. But Jeffrey goes knight e4. Whoa. Queen f7. Oh, queen
was wrong.
Wow, rook d6. Your
rook
move.
d6 instead. Mm-hmm. Because now Black threatens knight g3 check, and it's not so easy to defend against. Maybe king h2. What happens after king h2?
King h2, a rook g5.
Ooh.
Okay.
Now rook
f5, and then
repetition, maybe.
That's a pretty funny repetition.
Jeffrey might decline and go rook g5, though. Jeffrey might sense that he has the initiative, which he does. Yeah. Although rook g5 could be met with queen h4 check, and then maybe the king steps back. No, Alexianko's the one who declines it.
Okay, but look at your pieces, right? Queen an e1. It's a queen sandwich in the first rank, and knight g3 is still a fork that you have to deal with.
No, this looks incredibly nasty. Rook g1, there's another fork, queen h4. The king just drops back to g8. How is it zeros? I feel like white is losing.
It does look honestly bad for white at this point, because queen g2 is mate, knight g3 checks a fork. How do you deal with this? I mean, rook g1 might be the move, but actually it doesn't work. So because g4.
Oh, that's a great move because it covers the h5 square. Now queen h4. It's still not necessarily a threat. Jeffrey calmly takes the pawn.
Mm-hmm.
Everything under control here for Black.
There's no way that this is just equal. It just looks so bad for white.
No, rook f8 doesn't work. This looks terrible.
Oh, knight g3?
Ugh.
Or rook e5, but now queen d8.
Whoa,
now
perpetual.
There's a draw.
He allowed perpetual.
He allowed it.
He allowed perpetual. I mean, not the worst result for Jeffrey. He was essentially losing. Come on, what is Kirill thinking about? Take it.
Yeah. Or actually, if you get yourself too low on time, rook h5, right?
I've made that mistake before, trust me. So apparently, maybe knight g3 in this position, but a fair result, I think, overall. And let's have a look at some of the games which are still going. We've got just a couple. We've got Bibisara Asobayeva in a time scramble against Alexei Drev.
Whoa. And what's the material count
on here? Two pawns for the exchange and a big pawn phalanx here.
Knight e3. Watch out for knight d5. Watch out for knight forks. They're really dangerous here. And b5. Push that pawn.
White is better.
I would definitely g4. Okay, she's keeping the pawn on g2.
G3 maybe to stop rook f4. She's taking too long. Drev is fast.
And Drev's a really, really good blitz player. Here comes the rook to go after that pawn on G2.
Uh-oh. But here comes white's pawns.
That's a great decision. Push to C7. Pre-move that.
This is coming down to a time scramble. This should be a draw objectively.
Right. Oh, she gives up the G2.
Whoa. She wants C6.
She wants C6.
But then, Rook C2 is such a classy Russian move. No, you're not pushing pawn.
Oh, G4. She's losing the thread.
But 10 seconds, she wins the pawn back.
But she's no time. The rook usually wins the scramble.
I know, but Drev is pre-moving. Look at the guy.
Yep.
He's 50 years old.
He's taking this one.
Yes. Look at the speed. This is impressive. Oh my God, he wins the knight. He played that like a hyper bullet pro right there. Did Alexei Drev.
And you would know exactly what that's like. And I think that is the last game of the first round. So it's just one round out of 9 in the books. We're going to do like Nicolas Cage and be gone in 60 seconds. So we'll be right back. You're going to watch more from the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase when we return. And we return ready for the second round of action here at the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. It's only a quick break for the players and for us as well. And Danya, we had an exciting first round of action. It's only going to get better as the games continue.
It really is. And we remind you that the top 8 players qualify to tomorrow's knockout, which last week, the inaugural week, was won by none other than Grandmaster Jan Nepomniachtchi. Oh my God, that was only week 1. We're in week 2. There is so many more weeks of this. This is great. And we already have matchups of monsters. We have Hikaru playing against Alexei Drev, fresh off of the time scramble. Mr. 50-year-old hyperbullet genius.
We also have a rematch of last week, and that's going to be an interesting storyline as the season continues because Shugirov is playing against Caruana, and that was featured in the week 1 highlights, where at first Shugirov was totally winning that game, and then there was a time scramble where Fabiano had the edge, and he finally took the last pawn. So we are just spoiled for choice when it comes to the matchups in the RCC.
Absolutely. And this one seems like a relatively tame knight f3 b3 system, which Hikaru really likes to play in rapid games. It's very positional, very open-ended. And Alexei adopting kind of a semi-Slav setup, although he has played the f6, which is, of course, quite a bit weakening.
Yes, whenever you play the move f6, it weakens the light squares, but the bishop can retreat along the light squares as well. So this is a standard setup against these b3 openings, and that bishop on b2, you kind of walled it off because the pawn on d5 will stay put, and that means that the bishop will stare into an admittedly good pawn, but a pawn nonetheless.
Yeah, and oftentimes in these lines, you're hoping that eventually the center opens up. Sometimes white prepares e4. Sometimes circumstances change for black and he is forced to take on c4. So very rich positional struggle, but we'll keep an eye on this game. Shall we have a look around some of the other top games? We have Sigurov Caruana, as you mentioned, which is also pretty normal Slav-like structure here. Not much to say here. Very, very solid for black.
Yeah, while we have a moment, we can just go around the horn a bit, check out as many games as possible. I mean, we have whoa.
Good thing we stumbled on this game.
What is it? There's a knight on h6. The queens were just forced off the board.
Looks like an Alapin.
It does.
It was an Alapin, and the smoke has cleared. We have a bunch of trades, It looks like, as usual, Wesley is slightly better in an endgame.
Right. And we want to look at the situation of the pawns and the pawn structure. White has 2 pawn islands, as is black, but it's a 3-on-2 advantage for white on the queen side, whereas black has a 4-on-3 in the center on the king side. But in these end games, the queen side extra pawn can be really a nuisance for your opponent to deal with, because pieces want to stay in the center, and yet you're distracting them to deal with those pawns. But for now, it does feel like Gusenov, he's fine, but we'll see how this game continues with the pawn dynamics as they are.
And for the time being, he needs to be extremely careful not to lose the game in the next couple of moves. Now, if Wesley plays rook takes d4 and you just sort of nonchalantly take, well, there's going to be knight c7, massive threat. Wesley takes on d7 first. He wants to target this knight by doubling rooks, this knight on a3, going to jump into b5, maybe rook e1 also. Very unpleasant position for black. And this is right up Wesley's alley.
Rook e1's a great suggestion, Don. He plays it. I mean, he plays it very quickly, because if you play e6, then knight b5 comes in, attacking a7 and the d6 square, hitting f7. The rook on d4 is in the perfect location because it can swing along the 4th rank and start attacking any of black's pawns. Rook f4, rook h4, rook a4. The rook at some point is going to attack the pawns, so black needs to be very careful. It may, in fact, go down material soon.
Yeah, knight b5, rook c4, knight c7 ideas are in the air. Wesley playing a slow move. He's going to massage this endgame advantage for the next 50 moves. And Gusenov has to spend a lot of time on every move here to ensure that he doesn't blunder.
Right. And we have Wesley on camera. You know, he's really laser focused right now. His forehead is going to approach the camera soon enough. And that's what happens. Players forget that they're on camera often because they're so concentrated on their moves and their game. And look at this, doubling the rooks in the e file, hitting the e7 pawn. The only way to save the pawn is to push it. But as soon as you push it, watch out for a knight infiltrating as you are highlighting the d6 square.
Right. Black wants to play king c7, I think. And for the time being, Gadir doing a pretty nice job of defending all of his weak squares, keeping everything together. Rook f4, Wesley continues to poke and prod. He wants to induce either f6 or f5, but I'm not sure that f6 is such a huge weakness. Okay, rook e7. Gusenov tries to keep his pawn structure intact.
It's just such an annoying position to play, Danya, where you really have no spaces black. So I would have also been tempted to play f5 and try to play e5, but I guess Gusenov figured that he's not going to get both of his pawns rolling, and he doesn't want to leave himself with a target closer to white's pieces. f7, hard to pile up pressure on. e6 a bit easier because it's closer to white's forces.
Yeah, this is very unpleasant. We will leave Wesley to massage his advantage in this position. One game that I really want to check out is Vidit against Bakro. Two fan favorites. And Etienne looks like he's come out all guns blazing. Now, did these players both lose round 1?
They did.
Wow. That if that is not a testament to how insanely strong the RCC is, I don't know what is. Vidit and Etienne Bakro both lost round 1. How often do you say that?
Not very often, and they're both coming off their participation in the first leg of the FIDE Grand Prix, and Vidit going to play in the second as well. And you point out that Bakro, he's going for it, and his position is marvelous because he has double pawns. The G pawns, we tend not to love double pawns, but in positions like this, we do, because the H file is open for black's pieces. So rook f6, rook h6, pawn g4, and all of a sudden, black is crashing through with queen h4 to follow next. I mean, we like the open file because it's a closed position. So any open file can do your pieces a huge wonder.
Yeah, and from that perspective, it might be worth for white to play f3, which he just did. Of course, that comes with its own set of weaknesses, and now the move g4 comes with far greater effect. It just blasts open the king side. This is quite an unpleasant position for Vidit.
And white has no real play. There's nothing to attack. The b7 pawn was attacked. There's a rook on b8 defending it. So where are you going to go next? What are you going to attack? Queen c2 retreating. And I still don't see exactly what you're aiming for here. And g4, perhaps it's too soon for that move because the white queen can, I thought, could try to come into the g6 square after a trade on g4. But
takes queen g6.
Yeah, you need some sort of play, right? Because f4 instead.
Ooh, now you can smash that knight into e4. Oh, but Vidit's idea here is to go knight c3. And if you insist, then white's going to take, and that bishop comes out of the doldrums onto d3 and chases the knight back away from e4. Black's advantage here is quite fragile. And I think Bakro is mishandling it. He has played knight e4, and he did it quickly. And I think that's very, very wrong.
Yeah, because when you have less space, you want to trade pieces. So trading off one pair of knights and the bishop, which was blocked in by its own knight, now comes to d3, as you pointed out. And the bishop on g3 for white will help save the king side, because a bishop on g3 defends the h4 square, protects h2 in case black can line up the pieces. And I really like what you said, knight e4, bishop d3, and so on. And all of a sudden, it's white aiming to take over some of the important king side squares.
Indeed, Vidit down to 5 minutes, but I think he's going to figure this out. And perhaps we can take this opportunity to look at a couple more games. What catches your eye?
What catches my eye?
Put you on the spot.
Yeah, you're making me...
So many juicy games. I'm just having decision anxiety because every single game has the potential to be interesting.
Yes. I saw that Aryan Tari is playing Matthias Blubaum. I have no idea what the position is, but those are two great players who I think can go under the radar. And you want to keep an eye on these players because in a tournament like this, maybe they're not the top 10 players in the world classical rating, but they can make their way to the knockout. In this particular moment, Danya, there's a pin down the E file, but it seems that after F3, the E4 pawn might be lost. But what can Black do? Because F5, I don't believe saves the pawn. And he plays it.
He plays it. Okay. So takes. Now white has a weakness on h3, but I think it does save the pawn. Because if knight takes f5, there's king takes f5, and black holds on. And not only does black hold on, but if you give black another move after king f6, black will be the one threatening to liquidate into a favorable endgame where his king is just going to be more active than white's.
And if we show the mass exchange on F5, then on E4, Black wins this endgame because you have the outside pass pawn, H5, G4, and the king walks in, as you're pointing out. So Black would win that on the spots, not just king and 4 pawns, king and 4 pawns, let's make a draw. No. This is about to get dangerous for white.
Yeah, and of course, Aryan realizes that, and he deviates with rook F3 check. Now, the question is, does he want to keep all 4 rooks on the board, or does he want to trade one pair and perhaps go king f2? No, he wants to keep all of the rooks on the board, but now the king can remaneuver to h4 potentially. And I agree, this is getting really, really scary for white. Black is more active. Black has better structure. This is going to be hard to hold.
It reminds me of a game from week 1. I believe it was Amin Tabatabai who won against Vida Gujarati. Is that correct? Like the king walked in, h5, h4, even into g3 later. So this is an advantage for Black, but still white has some chances. Rook end games, we know that even if you lose a pawn, you still sometimes are able to hold. So we can, either stay here, go to any other game that you want, Danya, but too many options.
Too many options indeed. Let's maybe quickly check back into Hikaru's game. See how Dreyev is doing in his attempt to. Oh my goodness, 7 minutes to 2. Are you kidding me?
No,
you're not. That's not going to cut it against Nakamura. It's just not.
And
it doesn't even matter how good your position is.
Yeah, look at the pawn structure, right? D5 is isolated. This knight went to D3. And I really like that move F4 because you've just shattered white's better pawn structure and can go right after the pawn. But you're now down a pawn. You're down 5 minutes on the clock. I just don't think that even as much as we hyped his hyper bullet skills, Dreyev is not going to be able to stand being down almost 5 minutes to Hikaru Nakamura.
Yeah, I mean, if you give Hikaru a dust particle, he's going to make you lose on time because of it. Much less all of these pieces in a very complex endgame. So with 2 minutes on the clock, I just don't see this happening for Alexei, who is playing really well, stopping rook g5. This is a very double-edged endgame. But he's got no chances here. I mean, you cannot be down 5 minutes on the clock to Hikaru.
No, you certainly cannot. And I see some peaceful games. I just pulled up the game between Arjun Erigaisi against Kasper Purin, but we also have the Fabiano Caruana game going on. So wherever you take us,
Whoa. Interesting stuff happening in the Fabi game. He has just played Queen Sigurov, who's playing white, has just played Queen b6, and this might liquidate into a draw. The point is that if you take on c3, white pushes b7. Now the pawn doesn't promote, but you use that pawn to recapture the knight and then take c6.
And you just showed an important move order because I think many people have been tempted to queen first in that after that trade because you promote the pawn just to distract the rook, but that actually would have left Black a pawn up in that variation. So I do like that you showed that line. And here for Black, do you have to trade all the pieces? Can you move your knight somewhere as Black? But if you start retreating, then c6, not now because the knight c3 is also hanging, but that pawn c6 long-term target.
Yeah, I'm not sure that this endgame is so appealing for black because, as you mentioned, the pawn on c6 is a major target if the knight somehow gets to b4. Now, Fabi taking a slightly different approach. He goes queen a8, so he keeps the queens on the board, and he's definitely playing for a win. I mean, he saw that he could make a draw. I think he judges that pawn on e3 is weak. White's king is quite a bit weaker than its vis-a-vis just because white has this f4 move in. And Robert, you know, if Fabi can get his rook and his queen on the second rank, that could be dangerous. Objectively, I think this should be equal, though.
Yeah, I do really like the move h5 that Fabiano just played, though, because if you can put that pawn on h4, try to maneuver your queen into the game, then that black king could be in some serious danger. Rook b3 played. Now the queen and the rook can team up on a rank, whether it's queen a3 or rook b2, queen a2. There's going to be pressure against this white king on h2, but it seems like it's going to be very difficult to win a position like this because at some point, white could even consider bringing the queen to e5, which tries to take the e4 pawn. And if the queen lands on e4 for white, it protects everything.
And black is just going to be worse if you lose. In fact, what exactly does Fabi do after queen e5? I guess he has queen a5 counterattacking white's rook, but that might be the only move.
And actually, it's a really annoying move to face because where's your rook going from e1? So these decisions are very consequential at this stage. Although, if you take on e3, then the rook can go to b1 to b8 and checkmate the black king.
Oh, so my goodness.
Yeah, you have to be really careful here for both.
Now, you could have a repetition. Queen a6, rook e1. But as you said, Sanan can go rook f2 and try to give up e3. I don't think he's going to do that, though. I think we're going to see a repetition.
Well,
neither player...
Can black give up the e4 pawn and try to checkmate white along the first rank? Both sides have their chances there.
You're having much more violent thoughts than these players are. It's the round two, you know. Don't want to take too many big risks. I flipped on Peter Svidler's game as well. This one, we don't have to stay in because I think this is going to be a draw.
Right. Because black's up a pawn, but the pawns can't move anywhere. The rook's on the A file. Make sure that black is in a defensive stance.
Indeed. Now, Hikaru's still grinding it out against Zverev. Still grinding it out against Zverev, but 59 seconds. Alexei has played so fast. Oh, but he's down a pawn.
Yeah. Unfortunately, sometimes when you play fast, you can't always play well. And here it's a clear extra pawn for Hikaru. He's going to bring his king up, try to trade knights once more with knight f4. And knight f4 hits both the d5 and the h5 pawns. And there's no way that black can defend at all.
Oh, this is a slam dunk. It's over.
Oh, he tried.
Or is it? Knight g7, trying to get it to f5. But always white has knight g3. White dominates black's knight. It's kind of a fortress. Knight e6 back to g7. If Alexei had maybe 45 more seconds, I would give him pretty good drawing chances. And Robert, I think he might be threatening knight f5 check. The pawn endgame might not be winning because of the difference in king position.
Wow, king activity.
Wait a minute. Which Zverev does not
seconds. But I mean, if Hikaru had black, I still think that black loses this game most of the time, but you are right that there are chances. But look at this. He's spending 5 seconds. There's no increment. And king c3, you probably have to play a5 just to keep the king out. But then there's b4. So how are you going to keep the white king out?
Well, maybe you don't. Maybe you make a play on the h4 pawn. Knight e2, such a tricky move, aiming for f4 and bleeding out another 10 seconds. No, he's just way too slow.
Yeah, I was thinking knight f5 for black, giving up d5 for h4. He does that, but the evaluation bar goes up. So clearly that was a mistake. But in time trouble, you have to make decisions like this, even if they cost you, because otherwise you're just losing the time anyway.
I played him up, but I mean, it's very understandable to take this amount of time against Hikaru. He puts such difficult problems in front of you. We can safely say that Hikaru was going to win. Wesley drove the point home against Kusena. Very, very smooth game there. And we've got action in Tari against Bluebaum. That endgame has heated up, but it looks like only black can win. Black's got massive king on f3. White's king cornered on h4, trying to avoid checkmate. This is really difficult, but rook d7 maybe?
Yeah, he cuts the king off, but it allegedly is a mistake. But rook b6, and now b4 is possible, and the king for black is also cut off.
That's funny. And now white's king can liberate itself through g5, and then he will never again have to worry about getting checkmated on the side of the board. This should be a draw. I
think what black needs to try, Danya, is like rook b5, pawn a6, pawn b6, pawn a5, and then force white to deal with what's becoming an outside pass pawn.
Agreed.
And does it?
Rook b5. Also, a minute on the clock for Aryan. We could see a rook versus rook situation here. And guess what, Robert? There's some qualification spots on the line. I don't think anybody's going to blame a player who who plays a couple of moves in a drawn endgame. What's wrong with that?
You play A6. I mean, seriously, you can try to win this game.
God, Blue Bomb is so tricky in endgames. The guy has that 2,700 ness about him, where he'll keep manufacturing chances even in positions where others would already admit the draw. B6, let's go.
But if B6 was King F1, so the white king is trying to go King F1, King E1, and work its way over. And if King E2, then white goes King G3, and then tries to go King F4, King E4, and so on. So I think that we could see a little repetition with the kings. Oh,
B5, he adopts another pawn setup. Now Rook D6 seems like it wins the pawn. King E1. Now the king keeps heading toward the queen side. Now, don't laugh, but black has to be a little bit careful now. Black has to be just a little careful.
I think that black is in some trouble because if you lose A6, I mean, the king on the queen side for white isn't well placed.
Rook takes A6 though. King D3.
They have Rook C6.
Rook C6. Don't go Rook C2.
Rook C5. Okay,
this
is definitely a draw.
Now Rook C2 was a draw, but man, the fact that white is the one up a pawn in this position is quite amazing.
Yeah, and
Rook C2, trade and a draw. What a game. That was one heck of a battle. We've got a couple of games still going. We've got, let's see, I can't even decide. There's still so many awesome games going. We've got Paravian, who went very, very far last week. Where are the pawns? Where are they going? What direction are they going? White's pawns, I guess, are going forward.
But this is a big problem with having a rook pawn. You see the king on A1 is trapped over there. The rook on B7 cuts it off. So that is what's allowing white to, well, maybe even try to play for more here.
But if white promotes, he gets his newly minted queen skewered. Now black has to stop the queen, though. Rook H1.
And king here?
Renegade rook. Renegade rook.
Oh, good call. Because I'm like,
this looks
like a problem.
But Robert, does black understand that, whoa, why give up the pawn? There was no need to do that. He could have given a check on A6. Now he can take on E5 here.
Oh my gosh.
He lost promotion. Oh my God, he's going to lose.
He's going to lose. He didn't see it.
But wait, 6 seconds.
Rook H7. Rook H7.
Rook H7.
Oh my God, 6 seconds
for David, he missed it. 6 seconds for David. Black's got to make moves faster. Rook H2, Rook A2, come on. Queen A8.
Oh, Queen A8 wins the rook.
Queen A8 was winning the rook. Black is really slow. So is David. Oh, I think David's going to flag him. He's giving the right checks. Oh, Rook E2.
He missed it.
Oh, take the queen. Oh, he took it. Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh.
And Jumabayev got flagged in this position against Grigor. Oh my God. White loses because of this lone pawn on G6.
Oh my gosh, 0.7 seconds, all you need. And with that, the second round has concluded. We're going to be gone for 60 seconds, and we will return for more from the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. And round 3 has started, but I don't think Hikaru Nakamura knows that because he has yet to make a first move. He is the black piece against Arjun Erigaisi. You don't want to give Arjun any extra time because he is an absolute speed demon, Danya.
Yeah, maybe Hikaru stepped away from his computer. Maybe he's in the bathroom. Who knows? But we know how this tournament operates. The rounds, they start one after the other. We've got a lot of games to go through. And Arjun has offered a draw. Okay.
That's a sign of respect. And I mean, it's a good result for him. So, right, drawing Hikaru, you're never going to complain about that result.
Well, at this point, Hikaru has every reason to accept. He's already down a minute, and he's still not at the board. This is disturbing.
Yeah.
Will he see the draw for when he comes back to his computer? Because in a panic, he might end up just making a move really quickly. By the way, Wesley and Vladislav Kovalyev have already drawn their game.
Okay.
And no, Hikaru makes a move. Okay.
Well, declines the draw with a move, and he just wants to play. Also, 8 minutes, 30 seconds is an eternity for both of these players, and in particular for Hikaru.
Yeah, he can climb Mount Kilimanjaro and back in that amount of time. He can give a 60 bore simul in 8 minutes. And Arjun, is he actually equalizing the time?
Wow, that
would be. Wow.
I think he is.
That is incredibly classy.
I don't think
not have to do that.
I don't think we dole out sportsmanship awards here, but Arjun Erigaisi, a class act. We all knew it, but this is on full display. People watching would be like, wait, there's no moves. What are you talking about? Arjun is doing that on purpose because Hikaru was not at the board at his computer when the round started, even though the players know they have to be. And Arjun saying, I don't want to have any advantages that are not earned. So he is just giving the time back to Hikaru. That is the sign of just an absolute class act.
Mm-hmm. And this is what I love about chess. You know, there's a lot of money on the line, a lot. But at the end of the day for the players, it's more important to play on an even playing field. And it's more important to demonstrate respect. That transcends everything else, which makes these players so much easier to root for and so much easier to celebrate when they do win a lot of prizes. That's
right. So,
okay, we can. By the way, Fabi, what's going on? Parham has spent 3 minutes on the first move. And Fabi's not offering him a draw because Fabi has the white pieces.
Yeah, where are the players?
Guys, you have to realize that the games begin immediately after the previous one concludes.
Yeah, I mean, the players are
this isn't their first tournament.
No, I mean, this happened last week. So, and they play plenty of Title Tuesdays. Wow. They know the round begins.
A game that actually is underway. Alexianko against Zhang. That's not necessarily the game I want to focus on, though. Does anybody else have 2 out of 3? Or sorry, 2 out of 2. Amazingly, I think only like a handful of players have 2 out of 2.
Yeah.
Hikaru, Arjun, Wesley, and Kovalyev have already drawn their game. I think that's it.
Okay, well,
wow.
It's you're not too many participants in the field to begin with, and to win all your games is a very difficult task. And right now, Shugirov we have against Alexianko. This is early stage, but Danya, the pawns on the queen side, right? Black is advanced over there, and that's a light square bind. So the knight would likely come to a5. You need to keep an eye on your e5 pawn, of course, but if knight comes to a5, the b3 and c4 squares could be for the taking. So I like the way that Shugirov has played the opening stage.
Yeah, and Alexianko clearly not happy. He's spending a lot of time here. I think white should probably go bishop g5, maybe try for knight e3. But definitely, I think perhaps only black is contending for an advantage here. Knight a5 is going to follow virtually on any of white's moves, maybe with the exception of queen takes d7, but that's really anything else. Bishop d3 is still going knight a5. Yeah, he goes bishop g5. Sanan could throw an h6, which he does. I thought maybe Alexianko should take on f6 and try to pave the way for his knight to get to d5. But in any case, I think we're going to see knight a5 now.
Right, because g5, that's a move that you can play in some positions. Here is not one where you want to do that, because then the knight comes to e3. The f5 square, in addition to the d5 square, is a hopping point. So don't play g5 in this position, even though it would work in many others.
Yeah, don't succumb to one movitis. It can be very tempting to push your opponent's pieces back, but you always have to check which squares you've left behind. Okay. And on the board below that, we have Tabatabai against Vladimir Fedoseev, my good friend. And we've got a weird opening. Oh my good, look at this. E6, C3, H6, Bishop F4, typical Fedoseev, H6, G5. Look at him go.
Yes.
What a goodness. What a souped up London system. And it ultimately transitions into something resembling a normal King's Indian.
Yeah, how this happened is bizarre, but this is why bishop takes e5 was played. The d3 square, the black queen was at the head to b5. Here, knight c4 can be played, but after castle's queenside, I don't see any issue for black in the position.
None.
The one thing that you do have to watch out for is if this knight could, anchor itself on f5, as you're pointing out. But I think you're very likely going to have to take this bishop on e5, because even if your knight gets to f5, black will toss in d5 to undermine the knight's defense there.
For instance, if white just closes his eyes and focuses on getting the knight to f5, that's not going to cut it for many reasons. I mean, if you do it here, black has this little tactic. So Amin is not going to recklessly, abandon everything. If he wants to keep these pieces on the board, he should castle. But Robert, castling comes with its attendant risks as well, because if black can get g4 and the g file will open, I think Amin should just trade everything and offer a draw.
It's probably the best decision, and it's frustrating though. And we have him on camera. He's trying to figure it out here. He's up a lot of time, and that tempts players into saying, "I want more from this game." But his position, it could become worse in just a few moves, especially if he castles kingside into a potential attack. The pawn on g5 could very well go up to g4.
Yeah, and with every passing second, the likelihood that he takes on e5 increases. He hasn't done the head move side to side. I think I've told you about this, Robert. When you offer someone a draw, there's a certain head motion that they make. And if they make that motion, you know that they're going to accept. This is true of players of all ratings. And it's this side to side head motion. Like you go one side, then the other side. And that kind of symbolizes, okay, position balanced. Okay, some chances for white, some chances for black. So draw. You know what I'm talking about, right?
I know exactly what you're talking about. And especially as the time trouble stages start to come about, that's where it's, you don't want that chances for both. You want clarity in the position.
And Amin has made his decision, and it is a combative one. And he's castled queenside, so he circumvents the whole g4 problem. Obviously, now g4 is completely innocuous. White has nothing left to attack on the king side. I like this decision. I think this is interesting.
Yeah, and I think white could be better in a few moves. Even though the evaluation says level, the king can go to b1, stay in a light square, also stay as far away from the center as possible. The knight can then go to e3. And if you can play pawn f3, defend that knight, pawn e4 rather, the knight can jump in, then it's very clear that white is better.
Yeah, I was watching a discussion recently by two Russian GMs. They made this interesting point, which at first I was like, this is way too general to mean anything. But they basically said that in Blitz, knights are just often better than bishops, period. Even if the computer evaluates a certain position as equal, it's just easier to handle the knight. The knight has more inherent trick value because of forks and, the way it combines with the queen. And I think there's something to that, Robert. I think we're seeing that here. Black is facing some difficulties.
Black is worse, right? He tried to take care of that problem on h6, anticipating the knight coming to f5. So he started pushing his queenside pawns, but now he has split pawns on that side of the board. The knight can still come to e3 and jump into f5. Even a queen trade would be very tempting for white because of black's pawns on the king side over here. So g3, knight f5, keep that pawn on h5 stuck in place, and then start piling pressure on it. Black is much worse now.
Yeah, I think this whole g5, g4 idea, and now that white has castled queenside, has backfired spectacularly for Vladimir. He's down to less than 5 minutes. Has kept the big time advantage. Now when the knight comes to f5, this gets worse and worse. Bishop h8, another impulsive move. I think he should have kept his bishop on f6 so that you can at least, if necessary, bring the rook to h8. Now queen f3 is a big threat.
I think this position epitomizes, as you say, biting on granite, because look at the bishop on h8. It has a whole diagonal in front of it, and yet it's a mini pawn chain that makes the bishop useless. And the pawn on h5 with the rook on h1 staring at it, it's just a problem. And you could even throw in f4. I know we've been talking about keeping that pawn e4 safe and sound, but the rook can't leave the e-file, otherwise you get forked with knight e7 check. And if the rook has to retreat along the e-file and you don't go to, say, e8, you also have to watch out for e5 at some point. There could be oh my gosh, f4, rook e8, e5. I just want to show something. In knight e7
Wait a minute. But that doesn't work because of the pin.
Oh, it's pinned. I blundered. I was trying to go for a nice tactic.
Now you're going to jinx him. No, but yeah, here you can play a neutral move. You can play king a1 to prepare it. But going for the more positional approach, f3, creating a little pawn chain of his own. And the sound effect that I associate with black's bishop is that sound when your vacuum cleaner picks up a piece of glass. A very unpleasant, like that's what I feel like when I see the bishop staring at c3. No, he does go f4. So he thought better of it.
Yeah. So he went F3, then F4. Did he mouse up the first time? Because I feel like allowing the bishop to F6 is only an improvement for black, covering the E7 square. Maybe black will play H5 to H4. It could be a pawn sacrifice, but at least you're disconnecting white's pawns on the king side as well, and then go after the F4 pawn.
I agree. So a little bit strange. I mean, definitely still better. But now the E4 pawn is somewhat of a target. Fedoseev can double rooks. At least he's got something to attack. We'll keep an eye on this. Shall we check back into our top game, Hikaru against Arjun? Let's
do it.
And see how that one is going. And it is going.
Yeah, but who's it going for? Because the eval bar, of course, says, it's zeros, right?
Yeah, equal. What is there to talk about?
It's an exchange down for black because black is a rook, but white has a knight and a pawn, and it's a pass pawn on b4, and there are no open files. You can see the A file is open, but if you go rook a8, b5 as you're highlighting, and wow, I think that this could be very dangerous for black.
It could be. It could also fizzle out into a draw after rook takes a6. I think queen b4 is an implicit draw offer. Rook takes a6, ba, queen takes a6, sign the score sheets. But Hikaru, he wants to keep the tension. He senses that if he can win this game, he'll be alone at 3 out of 3. And I agree, this is very, very risky. But how does Arjun improve his position? Maybe just king h2, maybe just play the waiting game?
I like king h2. I also was thinking, can you play queen d6? Because queen d6, queen b5, things like that, where there's background checkmates for black coming. But after knight c7, queen b1 check, like some of this, king h2, rook to a1. I think white has a perpetual here with queen takes e6, and then take on f5 and just make a draw. Oh, there's no queen f5.
Defends that.
It is not the first time today I have made a tremendous blunder. So,
but you're good. But this is why I think king h2 is such a good move. It takes the sting out of any such move like rook a1 or queen b1. They won't come with check anymore.
Well, that's king h7 similarly, right? Queen takes e6. If white is going for these variations, won't come with check.
Right, two can play at that game, says Hikaru. Here comes Arjun's queen. It can be chased away with rook c8. We might see some sort of a repetition here. Rook c8, queen b4. It might be a situation, Robert, where neither side can make progress because, again, mutually assured destruction. Both sides are really on the brink here.
Yeah, the knight on a6, it just closes the a file. There's no rook b8 to team up against the pawn on b5 because the knight covers that square. So as you're saying, rook c8 back and forth could be an option. But after queen d7, is black trying to orchestrate some kind of rook a7 to b7? I don't know if you'll have all the time in the world to get away with that, but it seems like black's king is perfectly safe, and that means Hikaru can play on.
Yeah, and if I'm Arjun, I'm basically going back and forth with my queen and trying to play as quickly as possible without being careless. Because Hikaru's approach could also be to bleed as much clock as he can, and then at the right moment, play something like g5, f4, which might not be objectively sound, but will cause a lot of problems and time pressure. And Hikaru is the one now who is down almost a minute on the clock. Rook c8. And now you can go to a5.
Honestly, Arjun, you start thinking, I'm up 40 seconds about. I have a position where I feel like I shouldn't really be able to lose. He could think about playing for a win right now. E6 is under attack.
This is heating up, though, but Hikaru wants to get his queen to h5 and his rook to a1.
That's right. So if white plays f3 trying to win, then there could be rook b8 and the b5 pawn falls. So
this is starting to, I don't know about queen b6, Robert. Knight takes e6, check. Hikaru has perpetual in his pocket. He can go rook a8. This is really scary, though. Arjun has to calculate this very accurately. Uh-oh. I think this is sliding off the rails here. And apparently e5 was very strong there.
Wow. E5 opening the position up and then trying to go after that king on h2. Now queen d6, as you're pointing out,
move.
It stops e5 and the e6 pawn will be hanging. And if knight takes e6, then it's the black's king that now needs some safeguarding. So both kings are not safe despite being tucked away for the moment.
I was about to say, do not take on e6, whatever you do. The endgame is losing for white. That's a really bad move. That's panic. That's classic panic. When you face Hikaru and he starts to put the pressure on you, you react irrationally. This is unsalvageable because it's only a matter of time, Robert, before black brings his king in, relieves the rook of its duties, and then the rook infiltrates to a3.
For sure.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable how he does it. And he does it in the span of 2 moves. There we go. King e7, king d6, rook a3 resigns. Or this. Rook a2, whatever. However you want to approach this pawn. Rook a2, rook c2.
that's it. I mean, the knight is being kicked around a bunch. And as you said, the C3 pawn falls and one pass pawn is all you need. And Hikaru wins another game. Surprise, surprise.
Right. Who would have thought? He's on 3 out of 3. Fabi is putting the works on against Parham, who's got 40 seconds. And again, this is zeros according to the eval bar. Yeah, and I'm the president of the universe. yeah. This is
you might be the president of somebody's universe, Danya. So never count it out.
Okay. Thank you for that wholesome and affirming message.
Danya, you know what happened in this game is Parham didn't show up for the first 3 minutes.
Yeah, that will do it for you against an amateur like Fabiano. And I don't know, not the greatest idea to miss 3 minutes. Knight takes c4. And his connection also not great.
Judging by the time, I don't think that Fabi sat for 3 minutes and gave the time back.
Nope. How unethical of him. Fabi is such a dirty player.
Well, he's just going to end up winning this one, knight e3, because if rook takes c3, knight d5 is check. If knight takes c3, rook takes c3, and knight d5 anyway.
Yep, that is just cruel, and he's going to retain the extra pawn, and Parham might simply resign here. Wow. And of the other games, we have Amin. Wow, Fedoseev is going to win.
What?
How did that happen? How is this possible?
He was much worse when we checked in earlier, and now he's just pushing his pass pawn. Don't play king d3. Okay.
Right. Blunder the rook. Nothing remains of White's knight on f5, White's former glory. I think things started going wrong for him after f3, f4. That hesitation, Robert, I think that set him off a little bit.
And it could be one of those moments where you're like, I don't trust the move, but then you're like, I have to play that move. But the stutter steps sometimes work in professional sports. Here in chess, nope, that gave Black a crucial tempo. So here, king e4, pawn e2, the king. Ooh, okay, rook c5 check. Okay, he allows
rook c5 was more accurate, but this is still completely winning.
Yeah, e2 is coming.
I mean, might resign. King takes g3, I think, is the simplest. Hiding behind the pawn, even better.
I love it.
It's over. King d4, move the rook back.
Yeah, just push that pawn. Or you can rook e7, as you're saying. Just keep the rook, makes it easier, especially in time trouble. So e2, unstoppable. So I wouldn't pre-move e2, though. Because I'm Amin, I know I'm completely lost, so I make a move like rook f7, and please pre-move e2. So don't pre-move too early.
What a meanie. What an meanie. No. Okay, next game. Forget I said anything.
Yes, I
Bilodeau lost again. Yeah, Kirill just seems to be struggling this tournament. Maybe a bad aftertaste from last week still in his mouth, but Sanan, he wins, and he's on 2.5 out of 3. Very impressive.
He's a great player, and he did really well last week, at least in the early stages. He didn't quite make it to the knockout, but he is a fantastic player. And do we have some games remaining? We do. Wow, what's this? Rook 8 mate?
This one's about to end. Okay. All right, Matthias. Okay, well, that was over as soon as we checked into it. We have a time scramble here. Unfortunately, it's a one-sided time scramble.
Okay, but the position itself is interesting. Knight b3 check is a huge threat. King f3. King
f3. Gonna make it though. It's not gonna
play queen e2 check. Oh, it's no knight e2 check. I blundered so many queens today.
Oh my god! Look at the eval bar. Queen e3 mate. Oh my god! He had made it one. It's not gonna matter though. He's got too little time.
Yeah.
Queen takes d4 mate.
Wow.
How many mates were missed there? What is going on here? Okay, Vidit is gonna win.
King takes g5. And he wins on time, wins on position.
And the last game, we got a time scroll Krikor with 4 seconds, but he's about to promote in a draw by repetition. A lot of time scrambles. And that concludes round 3. A third of the tournament is over.
I can't believe it. It's gone by in a flash. That's the nature of the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. And we will be right back. We'll be just gone for a minute, and we'll return to be round 4 here at the RCC. The Rapid Chess Championship is brought to you by Coinbase. Whether you're looking to make your first crypto purchase or you're an experienced trader, Coinbase has you covered. Earn crypto by learning about crypto with Coinbase Earn. Explore DeFi and Web3 with Coinbase Wallet. Get exclusive rewards when you spend with Coinbase Card and much more. Learn more about Coinbase.com/chess and get $10 in Bitcoin when you sign up and verify your account. The chess is underway. Danya, we're seeing the well-known repetition between Hikaru and Fabiano Caruana. I thought that was reserved for Hikaru and Wesley.
I know. I mean, I don't know if Hikaru and Caruana have had a traditional way that they made a draw. I don't think they've made too many quick draws. But in any case, a draw, an interesting decision by Hikaru. Robert, I would have imagined that he would play with the white pieces, but maybe he wants a break. He wants to solidify his lead. I can understand this decision. Fabi is dangerous.
He is. And, Hikaru just wants to make the top 8. It doesn't really matter where in the top 8 you get for the players in terms of getting to the knockout, but you get white pieces in the rapid game in tomorrow's action. So it does matter. But for the players, their first and foremost duty is to make it to the top 8. But right now, Donna, you have the game between Wesley So and Hayek Martirosyan. We mentioned how Wesley makes that draw against Hikaru, the queen shuffling back and forth for both sides. And here, it's going to take some shuffling because the position is very close, Danya. But white tends to be a bit better because that bishop on c7, it's not coming to life unless you play the move pawn to d5, which you're definitely not playing now that the king went to h7.
I don't like that move. And for exactly the reason that you just mentioned, anytime you play d5 now, and it's essentially out of the question because you've walked yourself into this incredibly nasty pin. And in many cases, you're just going to lose material. I mean, you're just not going to be able to recapture the pawn at the end of the line. I think king h7 is one of those moves that you kind of impulsively play. And then you realize, wait a second, I just walked myself into this super nasty pin. Wesley has a million ways to improve his position. Rook a d1. At some point, he can even consider going c4 and expanding in the center. And
I think that Hayek Martirosyan's decision was preemptive, right? He saw queen d2 coming, lining up with the bishop on e3. He wanted to defend the h6 pawn, but now he's not going to be able to open up that bishop on c7, as we've been talking about, and white can be flexible on both sides. So there are times where you push your c pawn to c4 to say, I'm just going to gain some space. And if black ever takes the pawn on d4, then your knight just hops into the d4, or even bishop takes d4 is also good. But the point is that white is expanding and black is very cramped.
Extremely cramped. And this is, again, right up Wesley's alley. He's done a good job so far this tournament of getting, from the limited games that I've seen, of getting exactly the kinds of positions that he excels in. There's c4, and black is just getting crushed here, run out of the gym. I think Hayek has to move his queen aside in order to create a little pathway for the bishop. Otherwise, you get your bishop trapped after d5. E takes d4 looks terrible to me.
Yeah, you can't afford to do that. It's a move you play out of panic, but the cure is kind of worse than disease, as you like to say, because ed4, knight d4, and pawn f4 storming up the board. And here, white can still just play d5, but at least the position remains closed. d5, bishop d7, white plays a move like b3 to defend the pawn on a4, and white has all the space. But how do you actually win a game like this? That's a different question. You're going to have to punch through f2 to f4 at some point.
Yeah, Wesley has to decide whether it's worth closing down the queen side. And I think for the time being, white's the only one who can benefit from both flanks as well as the center being more open. So Wesley making a more flexible move, queen c3, king g8. It was only a matter of time.
Yes.
And b3.
Still can't take on d4 for black. That's why Wesley's not rushing the decision to push his pawn to d5. He can do that at any moment. And yeah, Hayek's pieces, they're gasping for air.
They're all in the third rank, shuffling his queen back and forth. And playing this in classical is suffering. Playing this in rapid is especially hard because you have so much to keep track of. I accidentally played queen d7. Whoops, blundered a piece. Mm-hmm. Accidentally moved the queen to the wrong square, allowed something like c5. Sacrifice on h6. Things are hanging in the air on all sides of the board. Wesley, in the meantime, has a gazillion ways to improve his position, as we're seeing.
And that's why he's maneuvering the way he is. And I like that he played queen c1, as you point out, hitting the h6 pawn, but perhaps black wanted to throw a knight to f4 at some point. So you're just really eliminating all sorts of opportunities from black side. And here, knight f5, I think your instinct is, I need to take that knight on f5 because I don't want to get checkmated. But now the bishop on b1 is opened up along the diagonal. So yes, you have a queen and a knight hitting the f5 pawn. You're not going to take it. So e4 for sure.
e4, you have to play e4, and Hike has a great sense for the initiative. I don't know if Wesley has played this in the swiftest and the most precise possible way. Now there's knight takes f5. Now wait a second, Robert. What if black takes on f5 and this king on g1 has seen better days? All of a sudden, black's pieces kind of come alive here. This is a Hike Martirosyan move too. He will see knight takes f5. If I know him, and I feel like I do, he's going to play that move.
And he's calculating right now because it is a big decision. However, 2 pawns for a piece is already a lot of, there it is, a lot of compensation in material terms. But then you look at the king safety and there is none for white. That bishop on c7, previously the worst piece on the board, just 1 pawn trade later and a pawn push. And now the bishop is the best minor piece on the board.
It's crazy how the landscape changes so drastically as the result of one sacrifice like this, and this completely escaped Wesley's mind that black could take on f5. And, after king g2, it's not like black has immediate checkmate. But first of all, Robert, if Hike wants a draw, he can get it just by repeating with queen g6, queen f5. I don't think he's going to go for it. He can prepare to lift his rook with something like rook e6, but maybe he will.
And queen g6 check played. Maybe he'll repeat once, then try to see if he has more. But there is one thing that black needs to be careful about. The king on h7, queen on g6, the bishop on b1 is there. So there could even be a timely knight takes e4 tactical shot. It not going to work out in the immediate positions, but you have to watch out for that, because if white can get rid of some of black's attackers and put that king on h7 in some danger, that Wesley is going to keep an eye out for that.
And now a big decision for Hike. I think if he goes for it, he's going to play, king g8, following the advice of one Grandmaster Robert Hess, getting the king away from the bishop's x-ray and lessening the effect of any potential knight takes e4. Wesley desperately trying to bring some defenders in. How is he going to orchestrate an escape, though? Hike poking and prodding.
Yeah, it's like the king keeps having to go to this g2 square, so it's not like white can run away. The last thing that black wants to allow is like the king running e1, the knight moving f1, things like that, and running towards the queen side. But for now, what about rook e6? Exactly, you pointed to it as I was saying it. We are in line with each other's thoughts here. It's a bit of telepathy. But rook e6, move the knight, rook g6 check. It feels very dangerous.
It really does. And the crucial thing to realize is that white is nowhere near. Wait a minute, bishop, but this allows bishop f4.
Wow.
Doesn't this allow bishop f4? Am I crazy?
That's
Could this be a mouse slip?
I don't think it's necessarily a mouse slip, but he probably sees bishop f4 and thinks that it shouldn't work out. And
I don't understand anything that just happened in the last 2 moves. Bishop f4, maybe Hike wanted to sacrifice like rook g5, but white just takes it and goes king f1. And instead of being up a piece for 2 pawns, white's up a rook for 2 pawns.
Yeah. No, I mean, the bishop is a very important defender, but bishop f4 now is even better. Yeah.
I almost hallucinated. I thought for a second, rook f5. Oh, there's queen takes f2 mate. And I realized queens don't move like that just yet. And Wesley takes the, whoa, knight e4. What is he doing?
No, this is
a disaster. Knight e4, rook takes d1, and bishop takes d1, attacking the queen.
It's done. And you see Wesley
with a fist bump.
Yeah. He's like, I was in big trouble. Knight takes e4. Now everything is resolved here. And it's black who is just down a piece for 1 pawn and no attack because all the pieces are coming off the board.
This was really bad, Robert, by Hike. Starting with rook e5. He found knight takes f5. He was in charge. Declines the draw, which is totally justified, but losing the thread completely. Wesley has a little bit of work to do, though. Black still is a pawn for the piece. The king on f1 still a little bit unsafe. I've seen these positions go south, Robert, but not in the hands of Wesley So.
And not Wesley So with 5 minutes plus on the clock. Right? Too much time here. So it looks like Wesley, he's going to join Hikaru with 3.5 and a 4 unless something goes completely wrong here. And what's happening across the other matchups if we can tune in?
Well, my instinct is to say that white's much better here, but the eval bar seems to think that black is better.
I know why. King f7.
King f7. Oh, what a beautiful positional idea. Because if rook takes d7, rook takes h7, I always say this, only open... No,
King d6. Just king d6, king c5.
You just infiltrate. No, look at these pawns. They're sitting ducks. Black's king is just going to turn the vacuum cleaner on, take all the 3 pawns, and then promote.
So you hated the vacuum sound earlier. Now you're more in line with it.
Now it's the sound of a vacuum cleaner that's working. It's picking up dust particles. And this is exactly what's happening. Who's the prophet here? Thought it was me, but it's actually you. Vacuum cleaner is on, Robert. And you know what? Black's game might even go, do not pass go, do not collect $200, go straight for the A pawn. That is the real prize. That's the jewel. Because once you take that pawn, you can just run your A pawn down the board.
And I think that people will often want to take the C4 pawn because it's closer. But once you take on C4, you're still far away from getting a passed pawn. So let's say white goes rook G7, rook takes G6. You want to be as quick as possible because white is going to have some passed pawns running up the king side while your pawns run up the queen side. Now, it's in this position, white didn't even go for the pawn. So black has some extra time. And king B4 next. Oh, rook D7 is a good move. The king B3 is probably more precise, and then C6.
And you push the C pawn
or C5, yeah.
C5, and then ultimately you're going to play rook C4 and dislodge the rook from D4. Although rook C4 can be met with rook D6, so there is still, and in rook endgames, it's never that easy. There's always a little bit of intrigue, but yeah, this looks bad.
Especially with A pawns, because we saw an earlier game where that black king was an A1, pawn an A2. Your king can't get out of the corner if you're trying to usher that pawn up the board. So there is still something to be worked out here. But look at the clock, by the way. Black is up, 2 minutes and is in a position that is probably winning with best play.
And Vladislav is, of course, I'm sure, very, very determined to qualify once again and give it another go after the unspeakable happened last week. Literally the unspeakable. We didn't know what to say.
I still don't. And I talk a lot, but right now, and king C5.
Whoa. Why not king B3?
Yeah, that was a really shocking decision. He doesn't want to allow the rook to D6. I think we can understand that. But the king on B3 keeps the rook frozen.
Because it keeps contact with the A4 pawn. Now white has a couple of tempi. Now, I think what Vladislav is saying, Robert, is that he's going to go B5 and create a passer. I think he doesn't even care about winning the A4 pawn. He just wants to pass pawn on the queen side. That actually makes some sense.
And I'm wondering,
it's not so easy to deal with.
Yeah, he does all this, and F3 play. And look at Shugirov desperately wants to create some pass pawns of his own. And if he can trade off enough pieces, maybe he can hold the draw in some of these later stage endgames. But right now, 2 pawns remain the king side. The A pawn is just going to be pushed up the board, but rook pawns can have drawbacks. They're often great because white's pieces have a more difficult journey to go get to the pawn, but it also can be bad if the king has to step in front. It can't get back to the B file.
That's exactly right. And that's where you have situations where king on A1, pawn on A2, rook on B8, and it's incredibly hard to disentangle yourself and promote that pawn. But this is looking, 1 minute 48, 3 extra minutes on the clock. Vladislav has plenty of time to calculate this out. I think it's safe to say he's going to win. Shall we quickly look into P. Svidy's game against Oparin?
Especially if you're going to call him P. Svidi, then yes, we should certainly look at that game. And, Svidler's position at first glance looks promising, but then I'm realizing that his pieces all are kind of stuck in a way. Like you can't push your pawn to E6 because your knight is hanging. You can't move your knight because the bishop on C4 is under attack twice. So the look of it, the aesthetic is wonderful, but where to from here?
But you could say the same exact thing about Black's pieces. I think, and Oparin just took a lion's share of his time. By the way, look at the clock situation. Svidler has been amazing at time management. Knight C6, hitting the pawn on E5. Now, B7 can be captured, not with the knight, because you give up the bishop, but with the queen, maybe. But then just rook takes C4.
Right.
And you give up 2 pieces for rook. No, this is good for black. So how should Svidler... F4 seems a little bit too weakening, but maybe you got to do it.
Because knight takes E5 is a threat. Although if the knight takes E5, yeah, that's going to be a problem. Bishop B5 played. Okay, that makes sense as well.
So knight E5, he wants knight takes B7, I guess. Rook B4.
Rook B4.
Nasty little move.
And just move your queen, but queen D1.
There's a sense in which white's position is really on the verge of collapse here. Yeah, because something is going to give.
And black's knight can come to D4, right, to attack the rook on E2. All of a sudden, black's pieces are jumping around, and the king on G2, if that rook is cleared off the second rank, could be in some big trouble.
Absolutely. Black's king, in the meantime, just chilling in his palace in Monaco, surrounded by bodyguards. Somehow Black's 3 pieces are wreaking terror on White's piece. Knight takes b7. What about?
Okay, queen b6. Yeah,
I guess Peter wants queen d5.
Okay, but
now knight
d4.
Oh, and rook d8. No, rook d8. What am I saying?
So I've rubbed off on you, but if rook e1 is knight c2, right?
Or you could just take on b5 twice.
Oh, true.
So Peter parting ways with his exchange. Uh-oh, now the queen coming into g1. Oparin is not done.
Okay, but I have to say that even though there's material advantage for black, the black king could be in danger as soon as white gets e6 in.
Yes, or even f4, f5, although that's a lot more dangerous. But first, Svidler has to deal with this threat.
Right. So rook f2, as you're pointing out, looks... Well, yeah,
if he can make a run for it, e6, he just ignores it. There's your move.
And the point here is after queen g1, king h2, queen f1, there's rook g2, and the queen on f1 is actually under attack because of the bishop's placement on b5.
Even king h4 there looks okay. That king can be very, very safe on such a square because it's very hard to access. And Oparin down to a minute on the clock. I think e6 is an amazing practical decision.
Yeah, he has no fear. And if pawn takes e6, even rook takes e6 is possible there, and there's discovered checks. So he goes for this line.
Goes king h4. Ivabar hated it.
Rook takes b5, quickly played.
Queen takes b5 is there. Oh, queen takes f3.
Queen f3.
Lose that pawn, and there's a million threats as a result. Oh, Svidler got too fancy. Should have gone rook g2. He should have made the simple move. He tried to get too cool. But wait a minute, Robert. Queen f3, e7. What's the exact threat?
Oh, you have h5 score covered.
Oh my goodness! And White is going to checkmate black in 2 seconds. There
is there a bishop move to go g5? He just takes on e6. Look at Oparin. He's just
such a it's a nasty decision. But he has to find the checkmate. He's got 30 seconds.
30 seconds. To do it. Yeah, this is not a lot of time.
Queen f3. You take the bishop. I don't see it, Robert. Bishop d3 maybe.
Oh, bishop d3.
Oh, and g5. Oh no, that's
rook g6.
Yeah, queen h2, king g4.
And then h5, queen takes h5. He must have missed the queen.
He forgot about the queen.
He forgot the queen. He thinks he's mating.
White is winning.
Yeah, the queen covers h5.
Oh my goodness, he's just realized it. Oh my lands, and Svidler has to be a little bit careful here. But queen d5 check, and the worst is behind him. He's winning.
Queen e4.
Or this.
Also good. Wow, you were correct though. The king is going to be shielded up on the 4th rank. It shouldn't have worked out, but in the end it did, and that's really all that matters, right?
And this is one of the hardest things to do in time pressure is to hunt down a king that's in the open board. From all my blitz experience, it's almost impossible when you need to find that one precise move. It can be a check, it can be a quiet move. Svidler with excellent time management, good decision making. Ladies and gentlemen, 3.5 out of 4. Give it up for Peter Svidler. He might be playing Hikaru next round in a little SCC rematch.
Yeah, no, Peter is a fantastic player. People know him as an elite, amazing commentator. They sometimes forget he's also an elite, amazing chess player. So we have this game. Is this one over?
Riveting game? Oh yeah, it is over. Sorry, this was a draw.
You're all good. I was looking. I was wondering.
We got Drev with 20 seconds. Is Arjun going to flag him? Yes, he's trying because he just declined the rook trade. Drev is not going to be happy if he gets flagged.
He should cut the king's cut. He won.
White's winning.
Yeah,
king
he won.
F5. No, but he's got 17 seconds, Robert.
Rook D3. Okay, you're right. Not a lot of time, but
goodness,
he's winning over the board
fast.
now.
I love how fast he's playing. I mean, he's been converting this endgame since he was 5.5 years old.
King E8, E7, but he does not have a lot of time. He has the bridge ready to build, but will he be able to do it in time?
The bridge is ready. The bricks are in place. He needs to add the cement. E7, 11 seconds. Rook F3. Okay, he's building the bridge. Rook C4 check. King steps out. Here it goes.
King D7, King E6, King D6, King E5. That's
my bullet sense tells me this will end in a draw somehow.
Yes, it will, because there's no way that Drev is going to be able to do this, I believe, with as little time as he has. I think Arjun might win. I mean, there's not much. Rook D1, he's going to play it on. Rook check.
He's not going to make it, is he? Queen E6. Drev has to pre-move everything. Oh, he's gonna lose.
He lost.
Oh, he lost.
He lost. Oh my goodness! You see that smile from Arjun? A very quick smile there, and he just like, I had to. Sorry.
Such is life. This young generation. Let me tell you, back in my day, you would get kicked out of chess camp for that. Arjun Erigaisi rebounds with a win against Rev. Hey, a point is a point.
And the players will need all the points that they can possibly get because this is a long season. And the players, they're working their way towards the finals at the end of the year. But, we still have one game remaining. And Krikor, I mean, he's been having a good event. He's winning on time and on the board.
It's over. He wins another one, beating none other than Andrei Volokhin. No slouch.
Mm-hmm.
And that concludes the games of round 4. Okay.
Well, I saw a request, to see the end of that game, where Black missed the win between Oparin and Svidler. I don't know if we, saw that up, but if we don't, maybe we can bring it up later. But that game, that was a close one. So round 4 is done with. We have a lot to play for still. 5 rounds remaining. The players are going to get a break right now. So we're going to take a bit of a longer breather, stretch our legs, grab some water. And when return, the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase will continue. And we promised we'd bring that position back to you. It was the game between Peter Svidler and Grigory Oparin. Oparin missed a pretty sweet tactic here, Danya. Why don't you show everybody what he could have done and won the game?
Absolutely. So he went for the H2 pawn, not realizing that the king has a safe haven on G4. What he had to do was start with bishop D3. Now, this move looks reasonable, but after queen D5, it appears that black has to deal with a discovered check. But no, he can do him one better. G5 check. Okay, if the king goes up to H5, the king is checkmated. But it appears that after king G4, white is perfectly safe, Robert. H5, the king just runs to G5. And here, an absolutely stunning move. I don't know how Oparin could have missed this with 5 seconds on the clock. Rook F4 check. Incredible move. Deflection tactic, forcing the pawn to move. Now you give a check on G2, forcing the king up to H5, where it is checkmated by the queen on H3. And it's so beautiful how the bishop, you pointed this out, is covering that G6 square.
Yeah, that was the win. Beautiful mating sequence, and allowing that pawn to push forward to G5 was essential. We can forgive Oparin for not finding it. He didn't have much time, but none of the players will have much time in the upcoming Bullet Chess Championship. And if Oparin wants to qualify amongst the many others, he's going to have to work on those really quick moments when you have 3 seconds on your clock and need to find the win, because the Bullet Chess Championship is coming our way February 21st to March 17th. You will not want to miss the double elimination tournament, which features the likes of Hikaru Nakamura, Andrew Tang, my friend Daniel Naroditsky, and many, many others beginning February 21st. That's Monday, right here on chess.com.
Super excited for the BCC. I mean, what is better than just playing Bullet? Playing Bullet with $100,000 in prizes. Mm-hmm. There you go.
I mean, you know, no pressure or anything, just a little bit of prize money at stake for you.
It's no pressure at all. I remember feeling more nervous than I've ever been, I think, last year in the BCC against Andrew Tang. I mean, I could barely make moves. My hands were shaking like they never do in normal play, which is, of course, a good thing, because that means there's a lot on the line. And there's a lot on the line here as well. We're 4 rounds in, Robert. And yes, to everyone's great surprise, Hikaru is sharing first place with Wesley and Mr. Svidler. 3.5 out of 4. I mean, they're facing off.
Peter Svidler, do not ever underestimate that guy. And look at the position he has right now. So I tend to believe that in blitz chess, having double pawns is a really bad thing. But then I had to take a step back and remember, we're in rapid chess type control. So having the bishop pair, in particular, white missing that light square bishop in front of the king side, that could be an issue for white. But Svidler knows what he's doing, as does Hikaru. So Danya, your take on this position where it says it's zeros, but black has the problematic pawns, but the bishop pair.
Yeah, this is very complex. And, you know, the question to me is whether black can orchestrate play on the king side. You know, maybe bishop h3 can be considered. White, on the other hand, might even refrain from taking on c6 if given the opportunity, because that opens up the long diagonal, and the bishop can park itself on b7 and follow up with something like f5. So it's going to be sort of a weird cat and mouse game. The other question here, Robert, that Svidler has to determine is whether he wants to castle short, or if the king might feel safer in the center. So very complex questions that have a lot of bearing on the way that the game continues. But right now, big decision for Hikaru. Bishop h3 is possible. Knight d5. Does he want to defend the pawn on c6? Very hard to make heads or tails of this position.
And one thing to note is that in general, in positions, when you have fewer pawns, you have more open diagonals, more open files. So losing the pawn c6 could have benefited that bishop on c8, but it was queen e8, Danya. And you asked, you know, is white going to keep the king in the center or castle? I don't think white is castling right now, because moves like f5, queen h5 to follow, that looks pretty scary for the white king. And I would think about the move bishop c5, because I would beg my opponent, plead with them, please take my bishop. And he just played bishop c5, because if you take on c5, you are positionally lost.
I mean, Svidler knows whose advice to follow. Yeah, rook takes c5, and black's position is in shambles. If you have to play a move like f6, now white can safely castle. Total clamp, total domination, and you're just going to follow up by smashing through the c file. This is no good. Queen b3. Peter preventing the f-pawn from moving forward.
And the queen could also slide over to a square like a3, just to keep the bishop protected, but also attack that bishop on d6. So what Hikaru needs to do is somehow keep that bishop in place. But at some moment, not right now, bishop takes d6, followed by rook takes c6, will be available to white. I wouldn't do that with the king in the center. He does castle first. But Danya, bishop h3, sure, you have an attack on the rook. The rook slides out of the way, and then you still have these problems down the c file.
Yeah, this looks mighty impressive, but black can't just manufacture kingside chances out of thin air. Yes, the light scores are weak, but black doesn't have enough firepower to make anything of it. And Hikaru's just really passive at the moment. He's got to keep tabs on all of his weak pieces in the center. I like this maneuver. He gets his bishop to d5, anchors it, uses the c6 pawn as, you know, something effective rather than just as a weakness. And now Peter has to find the right spots for his knights. Goes back to d2. What do you make of that?
I was thinking of bringing the other knight to d2, but I think knight e to d2 makes perfect sense. The bishop on c5 is defended enough times. Rook c2, rook f to c1. How is black going to make progress? You make the move f5. That's the tempting move to make in this position, but it has the drawback of white exactly playing e4, saying, I will meet your attack with a pawn push of my own. And then your bishop is going to be forced to retreat. You still have these problems on the c file. Your e5 pawn will be isolated. The knight on, on d2 can activate. And so it's just a tough position for black. And Hikaru, he's so pragmatic, Danya, that he knows he wants to go for initiative, but realizes that once those pawns go forward, they can't move back. So let's just keep the center as stable and protected as possible.
Indeed, and he plays quickly in such positions, which is very rare. A lot of players, they get into an unpleasant position. They take 3-4 minutes, even in a rapid game. Hikaru never allows himself to get that low on time. So he says, okay, maybe I could spend 2 minutes calculating f5, or I could make a move that I know is solid and keep throwing the ball back onto my opponent's court. Svidler thinking and playing bishop takes d6. I think he wants to follow up with e4, and he's decided that now is the time to ensnare the c6 pawn. Not bad timing, I think. He's already castled. He's got his queen in place, and he's going to go e4.
So e4 played. There it is. And c6 is falling with bishop e6, rook takes c6. There still are these light square problems on the king side that white will need to deal with, but it's only one bishop. You don't actually have an attack. So Hikaru's going to have to rely on some counterplay. He'll need some open lines for his pieces. So I could see him trying to make a move like d5, not immediately because the queen on e7 will be hanging, but after bishop e6, rook takes c6, moving the queen away, trying to make d5 happen and open up some files.
Right. And the other issue that black has to watch for, if you play d5 prematurely, white's going to slide the rook up to c7, and then you're going to have big problems down the 7th rank. This move f6, it was solid at the time Hikaru played it, but if white's rook gets to c7, it's going to be a major liability. Okay, Hikaru drops his bishop back to e6, rook ac8. I think he wants to trade, Robert, one pair of rooks to make it less likely that white infiltrates to c7. Very smart play by Hikaru here.
Wow. So
very, very smart.
Using the idea that we were talking about, but doing it in a much better way. As you point out, no longer is there going to be rook c7 stuff. If queen c3, there could be this annoying move, knight a4, just trying to distract the queen from the rook's defense. Well, the queen can slide back in the position after knight a4. It's not the end of the world, but then you have to watch out for your queen side pawns. Is b2 hanging? Is a2 hanging? Knight coming to c5, as you're pointing out, and that could keep the rook trapped on c6.
Yeah, here you have to find the move queen a5. In fact, it's the only move that doesn't lose material. Obviously, aiming at the rook on d8, not an easy move to see. Now, if Svidler misses that, he's likely to move his rook back to c1. Then Hikaru is going to strike with d5, and somehow black's pieces are perfectly positioned, as Hikaru's pieces always seem to be. And if black can get d5 in the right circumstances, I honestly think that Hikaru is going to gain quite a bit of compensation for that pawn. Svidler, this is exactly what happens.
Mm-hmm. And if the D file opens up, now you have to be concerned about bishop h3 and some back rank checkmates. So the bishop h3 by itself wasn't doing all that much, but you have to watch out for your last rank, and there's no way out of that. You don't have a way to push other pawns so your king gets some luff. No, your king's going to be in trouble. That knight on b6, Danya, that's the one piece for black that's not really participating. So if that knight could get into the game, black may even take advantage of the impending attack. But for now, the knight on b6 is far away from the important parts of the board.
And maybe it's worth going h4 for white. As weakening as this move looks, and he does it, okay, this isn't really luft, but it's something, right? You have the h2 square, which lessens the urgency of these back rank ideas. And maybe Svidler would even park his king on h2 as far away from black's pieces as possible. The knights are defending each other. For the time being, he's still holding, but here comes Hikaru's queen. He starts to poke and prod for weaknesses. This is getting a little bit Monka-esque. That's the best way to describe it. Maybe get that rook to c6.
I was about to say, you can play rook c6 now because if the queen goes back to d7, there's queen c5. Anytime a pawn moves, it doesn't cover the square previously had under control. So the d6 pawn prevented queen c5. If queen d7, now there's queen c5, and all of a sudden, white's piece is coordinated well. Rook c7 is a plan. The a7 pawn, a potential target. The queen stuck to the bishop on e6. White's pieces are coming to life. And h5 was played. Mm-hmm. And I would play b3 to dominate that knight, because I know if I play queen c5, you may have knight a4 or something at some point to pester me. So b3 just controls that knight, then queen to c5, or even queen to c1. Use your pieces along the c-file.
That's an incredibly classy move. You like to point out pawn 3 squares away from the knight. Svidler immediately going queen c3. So he goes straight after the 7th rank. I mean, that makes some sense. Now, pushing d4 would be right into playing into white's hands. There's nothing Svidler would like more than the center getting closed. Hikaru defending the 7th rank. Again, Robert, I would go b3 here. That's a very healthy move to just throw in, restrict the knight permanently. Then you don't have to worry about that later on.
That's right. And for those of you wondering, why is Svidler talking? It's because Svidler is streaming, and all players, they're under fair play observation. And there also is the games are being played on a private server. I know people ask, how can I find the games? How can I watch them? Well, there's a delay on when they're relayed, and you can't see them live on the server, just to make sure that fair play is observed. Not that we are overly concerned, but want to take the precautions, big prize fund. Mm-hmm. And speaking of taking precautions, Danya, I mean, what Svidler has done is he's made sure his king has some squares to escape to. His knights remain connected with one another. All of his pieces are protected right now. And the pawn a2 won't fall because the queen on f7, the bishop on e6 were lined up against that pawn. Now after b3, the knight is stopped and there's no access to get to that pawn. So all of white's position seems quite healthy.
And furthermore, I would very seriously consider pushing that a pawn up to a5 and trying to push this knight off the board even further. If it has to drop back to a8, that's going to be progress. Svidler getting his queen up to c5, and Hikaru deciding to trade on e4, opening up the d file. In comes the rook. No threats as of yet, but a little bit less than 4 minutes for Svidler. And Robert, this is what Hikaru does. He causes problems. He doesn't necessarily pose threats on every move, but he makes you think, he makes you scared. And Svidler has to be very accurate here.
Yeah, he's got to move. He's down over a minute on the clock. His king not fully safe. I would be tempted to drop my queen back to c2 to hit the rook on d3 to protect my knight on d2, because black is just trying to connect all of his pieces. Queen d7 at some point, and he goes rook d6.
Whoa, queen e7. Queen e7.
Oh my gosh.
Queen e7. He missed it. Now the rook has to go back to c6. And then Hikaru is not going to go back to f7. He's going to go to d7 and improve the queen position. Uh-oh.
That's a big oversight. And queen e7 played, of course. Mistake. Rook c6 only move.
Whoa. Oh, fg, he wants rook h6. But what if the king moves to g6? Just king g6 and white can resign.
Wait a second. King g6.
Svidler just had a complete meltdown.
What?
Everything is hanging.
What was that?
Hikaru plays that within 30 seconds. Knight g5 is uncharacteristically impulsive, Robert. Not thought through at all. And by the way, if you had gone to g8 instead, I think this is what Svidler was hoping for. You can take on d3 and go through to d8 and force black to give the queen back up. But you have to factor in all of the king moves. It's over. Hikaru's going to win.
Just missed king g6. Complete blind spot for Peter Svidler.
How does he do it? It's crazy.
Yeah.
He puts so much pressure of all kinds on you and just makes you have a meltdown.
And one of the things he does is he takes you out of your element. As you were saying, this is super uncharacteristic for Peter Svidler. He would have made a move like queen c2 instead of rook d6 pretty much every day of the year, except for this one. And now he's in the position that went from up a pawn in the driver's seat to just completely losing in just 2 turns.
Right. And because Hikaru's pieces are always defended, they're always healthy, all of these 50-50 tactics, they seem to work in his favor. And Svidler simply resigns, and it's not a premature resignation. He loses everything here.
And we can just show that pawn takes g5. The reason why, again, is the queen on e7 was loose. So there was a point behind the tactic trying to get this queen. It makes sense, but I don't know. It just clearly doesn't work. It's a one-move refutation. That's why we don't just play for tricks, kids.
And Svidler is going to be very mad at himself. He was playing an excellent game. He was, one could even say, outplaying Hikaru, but I think the time situation made him nervous. And at Rook on D3, Hikaru carries another one home, bringing himself even closer to basically guaranteed qualification.
And you brought us to a game that kind of looks like the Hikaru game we just saw, where white is up a pawn, but black has this really nice light square bishop. The king on G1 has space off the first rank, but still in some danger. And at any moment, Danya, there could be tactics. Rook takes E3, Rook A1 to trade rooks to get on the light squares, try to deliver a checkmate. So white needs to be very careful. I would prefer to have black in this position, despite the material being in white's favor.
Agree completely. And to that end, I would very seriously consider queen d4, just bailing out, allowing the queen trade. Now, black wins the pawn back with bishop b3, but at the very least, white is not really in danger of losing. Black has just offered a draw, by the way. And I'm interested to see what Alexi is going to do. He definitely wants to play, but I don't see a single move here for white that preserves any realistic chances.
Right, because queen d4 makes sure that you're fine. But if you don't play queen d4, I would say black is more likely to win than white in a position like this. I just feel like the king on g1 is very unsafe. And the bishop on e6 is a beautiful piece. It defends f7, which is the only potential weak point in the position, and it can go for the attack later. And as you point out, the queen side, the a4 pawn.
Well, rook takes e3. He declines the draw and blundered in one move.
I mentioned rook takes e3. You had to be on lookout for it. He brings his queen away from it, and he loses in
it's
one
over
turn.
On the spot. I mean, how do you, what is king e7? And black is thinking, but rook takes e3 is unmissable.
And queen, if rook d8 to try to go queen f8 checkmate, that may be what he's looking at, but there's no way that white is getting the attack first, right? You don't even have a checkmate. That's the thing. Queen f8, king f6.
Queen e4. Yeah, just, he's played it.
No, it's just
unreal.
I mean, that is a shocking one move blunder.
You know what you do now? You say, okay, draw. All right, fine. You know what? I declined it, but I thought better of it. Okay, all right, fine.
What now you do is
you've proven that you can play, so draw.
What you do is you show your phone to the fair play team. I'm calling David Anton. He's my friend. Hey, David, I made a mouse slip. I meant to play queen d4, but my queen dragged to e7 instead.
Someone hacked my computer, and some troll played queen e7 instead. Okay, one more roadblock to traverse for David. Well, he could play rook h1 check here and bishop d5 to pick up the queen, but I wouldn't be filled with confidence at this kind of endgame. You know, these can be tricky. Okay, but he goes exactly for this endgame.
Wow.
But with a minute and a half, you know, I guess f6 g5 is the winning plan here.
Yeah, once you spot f6 g5, you realize it becomes easier for black, but this almost has fortress vibes to it.
Yeah, but the problem is the rook has no anchor points. The rook has no squares on which it is defended. That's really the X factor, Robert, in such positions. Because if the rook is undefended, it's only a matter of time before it's going to be picked off with a fork somehow.
So you want to play h4, but there are positions, right? If black plays h4 and we see a swap, the rook and f pawn versus queen h pawn is still a draw.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be very careful before you ever push that h pawn. There are positions where white can hold there despite being down a queen for a rook.
Yeah, some of these positions are crazy. You think it has to be winning, but if the rook can guarantee its safety, it's actually very, very hard to make progress. So you can see David is struggling. I think he's going to go h4 at some point. Yep, there's h4. And I think he's done it in the best possible version because he's threatening h3. He has a checkmate possibility on g2. And now he has to... Okay, he takes it. Whoa,
it's a draw.
Whoa.
It's a draw.
He's making the exact mistake you just mentioned.
It's a draw.
The exact mistake you just mentioned. He had to give checks instead.
You could give black an hour on the clock. It's still a draw.
Yep. Just king. The rook goes between e3 and h3. The king goes between h2 and g2. But white has to be careful, and I would go for the flag here.
You would try to win as white?
No, as black.
Okay, I was
as white would be next. Only Hikaru could pull that one off.
Because you said go for the flag, and I looked at the clocks. White's ahead, but I see what you're saying. If you can try to confuse white in this position, but king h2, king g2, queen e1, rook e3.
But at this rate, black is going to lose on time.
That's what I'm concerned about.
David is spending Oh, I'm always worried about doing that. Queen G4, maybe. But now just Rook E3. It's actually very easy. White has 2 sets of moves, and he has to just choose the one that's legal.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
I think he's forcing a draw.
It's a draw.
What a miss for... How did Alexi save that? Unbelievable.
Well, firstly, how did Alexi allow Rook takes E3?
Rook takes E3.
But he knows his end games. And, we were highlighting that this end game is a theoretical draw, and he gets the exact end game he wants. And for David on time, he didn't have enough time to figure out, I can do something that I don't need the A4 pawn. I can just try to win with the queen in the initial position. The A4 pawn was irrelevant. Here, gosh.
Another queen versus 2-piece. But here, Paravian has 15 seconds. He's completely winning, obviously. Vladimir is a really good bullet player. Unfortunately, Robert, everything's falling apart here. He's going to go C2.
Rook C6.
Once the rook is gone, Fedoseev has to keep his bishop alive as long as possible.
But king E5. Here comes
now
the king.
The back flank is exposed. No, it's mate. It's easy. This is
king F4.
Goodbye.
And
Queen
Dreyev
G3, free move.
Is a speed demon. King E3.
I think Paravian is black.
Oh, sorry. I saw Dreyev's game was still going on the side of the screen. You're right. It is Paravian, and Paravian wins. So,
this is like a Carlsen Nepo with an extra rook. Now it's exactly like Carlsen Nepo. He said it no time.
Oh my god!
I didn't even see the clock.
Wow, he went Rook H8 and just gave away the rook. He had no time on his clock.
But isn't this similar to the Carlsen Nepo World Championship game? Like this is almost the exact position.
The pawns are F and E file, but yeah, very, very similar.
My goodness. This is why no increment is fun. Matlakov wins. He keeps himself very much alive. Remember, there are 8 spots. That's a lot of spots.
And well, that concludes our 5th round here at the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. We'll be right back in a minute for the next round of action. You will not want to miss a single second. And we return here at the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. And we have the game between Wesley So and Hikaru Nakamura. It's probably already over because I saw what they were doing, and they were doing their typical repetition of moves where, and it's done. You pulled it up. It's already done.
I think we've seen this line a couple of times before. Just a few, maybe even in this tournament.
I don't know if Hikaru also did this with Fabiano Caruana, but either way, this is the draw that these two players do like every single time they played online chess in the last few years. So no real surprises, even if it's not what we want. And no surprises from David Paravian down here because we saw him doing this all of last week.
I'm sick of this endgame though. Why is he playing this every time? And he keeps getting bad positions in this line. I don't understand it. He hasn't got a single good position out of this Scotch 4-night Scotch, and he keeps finagling it.
Maybe he just believes in it. Maybe you need to be more of a believer yourself.
Is that so? I will believe it when I see him actually get an advantage.
It's not so because Wesley finished his game in 15 seconds. So. And
what are you suggesting with that?
You just asked, is that so? And I said, it's not. I was doing a Danya. Come on, that went over your head.
That went completely over my head. That was so sophisticated.
Oh boy.
It was so sophisticated.
Oh boy. Well, this position, Danya, I actually like it for white.
Yeah, no, I have to begrudgingly admit he has a knight on f5. It's anchored. And Robert, I think it's important to point out that taking on f5 is not a panacea because these pawns are very tender. The bishop can come to d7 and only white can play for a win here.
That's right. And a5 was the choice. And sometimes you can even play the move rook e3. It may seem strange to allow a rook trade on the square, but after f takes e3, you're opening up your remaining rook at those f6, f7 double isolated pawns. You want to target those pawns somehow. So I think white can, in fact, go for something like this.
Yeah, rook e8, you can always defend this pawn from f3. And yeah, I guess David believes in it. But I still feel like black is just so incredibly solid. Everything is defended. I just don't see white making enough progress to win this game. I'm sorry, that this line just strikes me as too lifeless.
Well, look at Paravian's score. He's 3.5 out of 5. So clearly
he's doing something right.
His openings are working out, even if they're not working out, you know?
I know. I'm just being overly critical for absolutely no reason.
No, but
I'm being a hater.
No, but you
I'm
are
being
correct.
A Scotch hater.
Because Jan Nepomniachtchi in their matchup on last Sunday, he had the upper hand, and then things got unclear where all of a sudden David could play for a win. But I mean, when you face off against these really strong grandmasters, you need strong opening play. Otherwise, your opponent's neutralized without too much effort.
Yeah, this was very interesting by Kovalyev. He went rook e5, inducing f4, and now I think he had a better option. I think he could have taken on e1 and maneuvered this rook to b4 in order to hit that pawn on f4, which actually is quite a serious weakness. Instead, he's gone back to e6, so we have this cat and mouse situation on the e file. Who flinches first? You could still consider rook b4 here, but then white's king comes to the rescue just in time.
And that bishop on f8 is terrible, and it needs to stay put defending h6. So white has the activity, black is very passive but solid. And so for black, you may think, well, can I just double in the e file? I put my rook up past the last rank so I can double. But white never has to trade rooks. Like white can swing over to the c file, rook c1, maybe play c4 if you're not careful. And if you can open up lines, then white can even play for an attack.
Yeah, it's like everybody shows up at a party, but the real party is elsewhere. It was just a front. Right? There's nothing going on the e-file. The bars are closed.
Has that happened to you, Danya? It sounds like, there's a story to tell here.
Never. I'm the organizer of parties, first of all. I don't show up on them. I organize them.
Got it.
And second of all, they open the bars just for me,
Well,
they know I'm the RCC commentator, and that's all I need to say.
Surprises me none. And here's c5. Doesn't really surprise me much either because c4 is a huge threat, and that would force the pawn off of b3. That means a4 would fall. So all of a sudden, Danya, it looks like black, you're not going to be shocked at all. You say that these openings have been working out for Paravian. I like black's position. Yeah.
I mean, white is starting to backslide here. He's got, beautiful knight on f5. Position looks good, but black just has, a greater number of concrete ideas. And David trying to stay afloat here. Bishop b5, giving up a pawn in order to take the sting out of c4. Shall we have a quick look at some of the other top games? We have Serena against Caruana. That's a lot of A's.
Yeah. And it's somewhat even material. I was like trying to do a pawn count. I was like, wait, is black up a pawn? Then I realized there's no H pawn for black.
It's one of those positions.
The H pawn just kind of disappeared, it would seem. But here, with the extra pawn on the queen side, Danya, and with the knight and bishop combo being able to team up against this c4 pawn, and the rook on d7 being better than the rook on f1, I tend to like Fabiano's chances.
I agree. And yeah, this pawn is a permanent weakness. At some point, knight a5 could come. Fabiano making improvements to his position, creating a pawn chain. Oh, this is black having all of the fun here. And a move like queen h7 is never really dangerous because a check on h8 can generally be blocked by the bishop. So black's king may look a little bit flimsy, but by and large, it's totally safe. White doesn't have the firepower to orchestrate any kind of sustained attack. Maybe you can move the bishop away and try to go f4. What do you think of that idea? Just as a way to try to muddy the waters, change the course of the game. I would go bishop e4 here.
You probably need to do something like that because your position looks really bad. But knight a5, taking c4 so quickly.
Take c3.
That's a nice tactic.
And bishop takes c4. Rook c1 by Alexi. That's a bit of a sad move.
It's a very sag move.
Yeah,
I mean, black has all the fun. You can't play bishop c3 to stop knight a5 because then you drop the c4 pawn immediately. So the bishop on b2 is a bad piece. This isn't two bishops advantage. It's you have the two bishops, but your dark sword bishop is terrible. Disadvantage.
Biting on granite, and this position would make me very mad if I were white. If he loses the c4 pawn, he'll just be dead.
Well, it is a very instructive pawn structure that Fabiano has here, because you see a7 to c5, g7 to e5, the bishop on b2, unless you get f4, that idea that you've been talking about, the bishop will be a bad piece. And you can see Serrano's aiming for the king side. Queen e8 check threatens to win a piece. Bishop e4 to try to go queen h7 check is a possibility as well. So bishop f7 retreating for black seems to be the right first move.
Yeah, Serrano trying to stick the keys in the ignition of a car that hasn't been started for 50 years and hoping it'll start. You know, just throwing his pieces near the king side, hoping that something clicks. Not a bad idea, by the way, Robert. It's annoying. It's annoying. And now once the bishop has dropped back, at some point, perhaps white's bishop can step forward to g4 and try to control some squares.
And there's often an argument for even with like bishop d5, it may cost black a pawn sometimes, but that removes a very critical defender from the black king. Fabiano goes knight e7, attacking the queen, covering the d5 square. His next move is queen d8. And look at the control that black has in this position.
Yeah, you might look at his pieces and say, they're passive. All of his pieces on the 7th rank. But as you said, look at the squares they're controlling. The bishop guarding e6, guarding g6, the knight guarding f5. This is like a force field. And the rook, of course, controlling the d file.
Yeah, well, you know, that means that's a force field. We'll need some, I don't even know what we need. I was going to try to make an X-Men reference, some kind of Magneto, Professor X scenario. But I mean, the bishop on b2, Danya, is such a bad piece. And I think Fabiano's next move might be queen d7, offering a queen trade.
Right. And the more pieces are traded, the more the badness of the bishop is accentuated. And Alexi trying to do something, h4. Fabi can bring his bishop back to e6 here before playing queen d7 or queen d7 immediately. I agree. I think queen trade is squarely in black's favor here.
Yeah, just a position where black can play with a free hand because you're essentially playing down an active piece. The bishop on b2 can't get anywhere. White, at some point, may try to play a4, a5. You know, if the queens get traded, hope to open up some lines, but black controls the only fully open file.
Yeah. No, this is depressing, but the clocks of both players ticking down. And I think one of the things Serrano could hope for, if he can just hold out for another 2 minutes. The problem is that he's not holding out at all. Fabi keeps making improvements. Now the queen on h5, Robert, is stranded. Whew. And this is not a serious threat. Queen h7, once again, the king can just move to f8. But maybe Fabi should go bishop f5. Yeah, he does. No, the control of this game is amazing. He is shutting Alexi down completely. This is like textbook.
Just one thing to avoid. Bishop f5, don't take with your queen. Do not do that. You lose your knight on e7.
Black is still better after rook d2. That's pretty amazing. That shows you the level of black's domination, but not worth it.
No.
Take with a knight.
And it's just superior minor pieces. The bishop on b2 is a truly awful piece. The queen and rook for black on the open file can try to go d2 or d1 if the queen leaves the h5 square and loses control of d1. So yeah, this seems like black is having all the fun here. And I did catch another game on the corner of my eye. I don't know if you want to stay here or go to that one. The game is Arjun Erigaisi and Shugirov, two fantastic players. Look at the king in this position.
And I think this is just going to be a perpetual. Queen a5, king b2, queen b4.
Because probably white's up a rook, but the king has no shelter.
Yeah, if you run to c1, I think you run into bishop f5 with unstoppable mating threats because black's king is incredibly safe.
That's right.
Yeah,
and the knight is trapped on b1 and you can't defend it, so bishop f5 would hurt. So queen a5. Oh, and queen a5 is knight a3 now.
And then maybe queen. I think that's why it's very important to give a check on a5 and not on a4. Because if knight a3, now the queen swoops into d2 and knight e4 is coming, Arjun's not going to risk it. But one last test for Sinan. Queen a5, he has to go there to keep contact with the d2 square.
And I wonder what else he's thinking about, because D takes C4 is queen A8 check. That's not something that you want to see happen.
Oh.
So
what if king B3?
That's what he's thinking about. Bishop E6. Oh, because you're threatening DC4 and queen B5 because the bishop will be pinned on C4.
Somehow white is up a rook, but it's completely not felt. You almost feel like material. You feel like black is up material, but seeing that is not easy.
No, even there, it still seems like white should be better because the white knight can go to A3 and things like that. Mm-hmm. But wow, this is a critical moment for Shigirov because he wants to make the knockouts, get top 8. He raised bishop to F5 and bishop F3 played immediately.
Queen G1 there apparently was the winning move.
Sorry, did you say Queen G1?
I did.
What?
I don't shoot the messenger.
Okay, but no one is playing Queen G1 there.
Right. Yeah, that's when you call the arbiter. I see what Arjun's idea is. He wants to go king A1. That's why he moved the bishop out of the way. Very smart idea. Now he wants to use the queen to block the checks. The problem is that Sanan could go bishop C2 here, intercept that queen, and renew the threats of perpetual. And man, oh man, he finds it.
And what about king B2 here?
Queen B3?
Oh, queen B3.
Yeah, you have to go rook C1. Only move.
Rook C1 and queen A4, queen B3 is just a draw, right?
This is scary. I mean, you have to calculate this move by move. The knight, a great defender, by the way, stopping all of these nasty checks, forcing black into perpetual. But in similar position, Arjun kind of lost his cool against Hikaru. So he needs to avoid the temptation to just kind of panic and make an impulsive decision. There we go, rook C1. Well done.
Right. Very, very good move. And this is just going to be the draw back and forth here. So this game concludes with the half point. Split between, not split, half point for both players. It is a split of a full point. It's not deprive them of their scores. Whoa. There's a
pre-core.
Oh, he just lost his B pawn.
And he's busted on the clock as well.
Yeah.
Okay, this one's over.
Krikor, a very friendly face in the chess.com community, represents all the Portuguese content. Unfortunately for the prominent streamer and very strong grandmaster, he's down one pawn, about to be down a second, and down 4 minutes. Yeah, this one's over, so we can move on elsewhere.
Yeah, Krikor is so easy to refer. He's one of the nicest guys in chess. Just always generous, sweet, friendly, gracious. So big fan. But Alexei Dreyev is an absolute buzzsaw. That was Russian School of Chess right there. We're looking at Bluebaum against Mkhitaryan. That's Haik Martirosyan.
That's right. And, well, King H7. Look at that move. Speaking of buzzsaws, and the rook is on G8, ready to barrel down that line, and it can go rook G4, bring the next rook on over to G8. And what's the material count? There is a rook on A1. I actually didn't even see that at first because it's doing all of nothing. And that's why I went rook A2 to try to help and defend the F2 pawn, come to D2 as you're highlighting here. But bishop C6, rook G4, rook G8, all of black's pieces are aiming at the white king, and black's king is perfectly tucked away on H7.
Yeah, and Haik wrapping his tentacles here around white's king. It might be time for that king to take a hike, but I think it's too late for that.
Nice one. Nice one. Danya, it's hike o'clock somewhere, but right now it's just hike time on the board because he is dominating this position. He'll go to 4.5 points. And as we see on the leaderboard, that would put him in tie with Wesley So, right near the top behind Hikaru Nakamura.
Yeah, there was a big group with 3.5 out of 5 before this round. And for those players, it's absolutely crucial to win 1, possibly 2 games in a row to really solidify their standing in the top 8. There's that king taking a hike. It's not quite over yet. Matthias, he's resilient. He's holding on for dear life. Haik needs one more. He needs one more angle. Maybe B5, maybe striking at the other end of the board would help.
Yeah, B5, nice. We're trying to open him. Ooh, and bishop C5. I saw the evaluation bar. That's going up for white. And
whoa.
Oh, knight takes F5 is a big threat.
As is knight takes C6, eliminating one of black's main attackers. Haik underestimating this move. Don't shovel dirt on him yet. He's got knight F5 and E6.
Oh my goodness. And look at the clock though. Only 43 seconds and counting down.
My goodness,
for
but what
Blue
a tactic. Will he see it?
I think he'll see it and still lose because he has no time.
No.
Okay. Or not see it and lose because he has no time.
And now Rook takes F4 and Queen H4. Oh man, that eval bar running the marathon. No, but now he's going to lose because he has no time.
I've heard that somewhere. I don't know where, but yeah.
Mediocre commentator once said it.
But I mean, the thing about this, right? It goes to show that even if you play great chess, find resources to defend, if you don't have time, you're going to be in trouble. And he plays Rook F3. He's aiming for the F5 pawn. He protects his bishop on F4, so the G5 won't be open. But now your move, B6, bishop B7, trying to get that bishop back around, or even B5 is possible. But I like B6 to keep it more closed. It feels like the king on H7 remains safer than the king on F1.
Right. And all Hike needs to do is bleed another 10, 15 seconds off Matthias's clock. Then the pre-moves will start. And then all you need to do is pounce on the obvious mistakes. But Hike's only up a minute. Gone are the days when he had 5 minutes on the clock. But look at Matthias. The position is so complex. It's not really his fault, Robert. It's impossible to find a move here without spending a couple of seconds at least.
And honestly, Blue Bomb's doing a great job. Knight C2, Knight D4 very quickly. Even here, Bishop C2, Rook B1 could be an idea at some point. And okay, pin, Rook D3, and now look at the advantage. It's growing for
Knight takes F5 idea is just crushing. Knight F5 and Rook D6 was winning on the spot there, but it's all of it is impossible to find when you're basically pre-moving. But how does Black make progress without ruining his own position? Whoa. Rook D6, Bishop F5. Oh my goodness. Bishop takes F5.
Oh, Bishop F5 missed.
This is also great. White is completely winning now. And Hike down below a minute.
Okay. So maybe we spoke too soon. We dug his grave and there's no Undertaker ready to say this is the finish. And look at this.
Funeral homes are closed.
And Rook G4 play, Rook F4. All right. So, it's just, you're trying to trade off Black's defenders. And he still has almost 20 seconds. The way Blue Bomb has handled this is unbelievable.
How the landscape has changed. Hike, though, Queen E7, he's still solid. Knight D5. Ooh, he shouldn't have given away that square, but Bishop takes F5. How does he see that in a millisecond?
Yeah, because he's a great bullet player. You know what those are like.
Bishop back to E4. He's got to move, though.
Then Bishop B5 check.
He's sitting. What is he doing?
He's got to move. What's he doing?
What is he doing? Whoa.
Oh, my gosh.
No, but that doesn't work. He takes D5. There's no mate there.
Yeah, what?
But he made Hike think, and Hike is only up 10 seconds now.
What was this? I mean,
he takes C5. Rook. He wants E6 and Bishop B5.
Oh my god! Rook H7 is mate too. Okay, he could maybe even trade rooks. He could trade rooks.
Hike doesn't know what to do, but Hike doesn't know what to do.
H6.
Matthias is still pre-moving. He's got mate threads galore.
He's got to move.
Seconds. He wants Rook D8.
And he wants Bishop G5, Bishop F6, Bishop G5, Bishop G5, Bishop F6.
Hike has to take on E5 and hope for the best. 4 seconds pre-moves.
3 seconds. Gotta go. Gotta go.
Distraction. 2 seconds. I think Hike's gonna win on time.
Queen 8 check. Queen 8. Oh, he found the check.
Oh, he made him waste a second. G6 and G7. He's gonna lose on time.
Oh, he won.
Oh my goodness.
How did that happen?
How did he survive that?
And he just is like struggling to breathe after holding in his breath for that whole time. But what a finish to this round.
Absolutely unbelievable. This is why we watch. This is why no increment going to be so much fun. And a huge win for Hike, who gets up to 4.5 out of 6, puts himself in great position with 3 more rounds to go.
Martirosyan is a very strong talent from Armenia. He wins this game, goes to 4 out of 6. We will return shortly for the next round of action here at the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. Today is Saturday. You are watching the Swiss portion of the Rapid Chess Championship weekly edition, but tomorrow is the knockout. It's an 8-player single elimination. They play 10 minutes with 2-second increment. If those games are drawn, we get to 3+2. If that game's a draw, we get to the bullet. It is exciting stuff. Last week was an absolute, just wonderful performance by Jan Nepomniachtchi as he made his way to the final. But Danya, they got to get their way through the last few rounds here of the Swiss before they can count on being in the final 8.
Yeah, I mean, Hikaru can basically count on being in the final 8. He is in clear first right now. He's got 5 out of 6, but there is a bloodthirsty group right behind him. There are 4 people on 4.5 out of 6. They include Wesley So and Hikaru's opponent in this round, David Parabian. Now, for Hikaru, it would almost make sense to make a couple of quick draws. I could see that being his strategy. But with the white pieces against David, I think he's going to make a push. He's going to try to win this game and take the pressure off in the final 2 rounds.
You know what's funny, Danya, is look at the ratings of the players.
Parabian is higher rated. That is funny.
Of course, Parabian, he's been great in the Rapid Chess Championship to this point. He made the knockout last week. He's been playing really great chess, but Hikaru Nakamura being lower rated than anybody not named Magnus Carlsen is typically a surprise in these kind of quicker formats.
Yeah. I mean, that is, whoa.
That move not approved of.
Bishop takes F3 and E5. Oh, but now black is just better, because the reason black is better is because white is never going to be able to get C5 in, right? Because of the amount of defenders black has on that square. In the meantime, David has a lot of play on the king side. Black is simply better here.
And we see
Hikaru has mishandled this.
He's streaming, trying to explain his thoughts here, but that was a head scratcher because look at that move, Rook A7. I really like it. He is refraining from playing F5 because he doesn't want to give that bishop any life. And if he plays F5, maybe there'll be E4 trying to open up diagonals for it. Even if the move F5 is good, I like what he's doing on the queen side.
David is playing quickly, confidently. He keeps making improving moves. H5, all sides of the board. Hikaru's still pretty solid here. I mean, he doesn't have any clear targets, but wow. Should David go E4 and vacate the E5 square for his knight is what I'm thinking.
He's creating the Alexianko gun, right?
Yeah, but where for from there? There's no there. You put a queen on E8. Congratulations. What now?
I don't know. I was trying to trade some pieces, but you can't really leave your king side. You don't want to abandon the king there. So queen G5 does make sense. I like your E4 idea, though.
And I wouldn't procrastinate if I'm David, because at some point he's going to allow something like C5 and bishop B5. Even here, this is an option. Maybe not so scary, but when you procrastinate against Hikaru, he keeps generating chances, and at some point you miss the opportunity train.
That's true. And I think Hikaru is calculating the move C5 right now because he's struggling to find any plan. So something that Hikaru did great, he was really just honestly unbelievable at during the FIDE Grand Prix, which was classical and then if tied rapid. When he had passive positions, he was really doing a great job of not doing anything drastic. He was keeping his solid but worse passive position and handling it pretty well for the most part. So that's what he's trying to figure out right now. Do I make a passive move like Rook C2 to B2 and just shuffle, or do I play the C5 and open up the board?
Logical. And I was also thinking about the move E4. The issue is that it weakens the F4 square, and black could stick his queen there. And guess what? If you have a queen trade, this knight is coming to E5, and G5, G4 is coming. This is no good. So a queen trade does not necessarily solve any of white's problems. But if you keep the queens on the board, Robert, then you really have to reckon with the knight and queen tandem, which is rather scary indeed, given how passive white is. Yeah, there it is, C5.
C5, he felt a sense of urgency, and bishop B5, knight F6. And after pawn takes C5, the bishop is alive, but it will never have any real targets. So black can try to play the queen from G5 to F5, maybe even play G5, G4. It's a common way of trying to make inroads against the white king. So knight F6 to start with, keep your better knight against the bishop, and then try to go for an attack from there.
Okay, but can you make outroads against white's king?
Make some country roads, make John Denver.
I didn't like the tenor of that laugh. There we go.
Yeah, well, you, I guess for better or worse, know me pretty well. So yeah, that was a pity laugh. You caught me.
It was a charity. It was like a, yeah, we'll talk about that after the commentary. Okay. Parabian taking on d5, the eval bar not liking that move due to bishop c4. And Hikaru's already equalized. It took him 3 moves from a lost position. That's 2 more than usual.
This goes to show taking pawns opens up the position, and that allows the bishop to finally have a target. So here black can still play the move pawn to e4. And
he has to.
That defends the knight. And you may win back the d6 pawn for white, but that's a better pawn to give up from Paravin's perspective than the f7 pawn.
Robert, knight takes d5 was a terrible move, and he played it way too quickly because keeping the center closed actually works in black's favor. It keeps white's pieces dulled down. So something like knight e4, queen f5, it's easy for me to say, but Hikaru doesn't just leave his pawns hanging. If they're hanging for a reason, and you better think twice about taking them. So he does play e4. I still think black is for choice, but it seems like Hikaru is starting to free up all of his pieces. He's got some squares he can access now. The tables are beginning to turn.
And if you make the move rook d2, that looks a bit clumsy because it could be rook c3 as a response. So
or knight
c3 is even better. But you need to keep an eye on squares like c3. So queen d2 is possible here. But even after queen d2, Danya, there could be c6 to defend the knight because once white takes on d6, it looks like queen e5 will get that pawn right back.
Yeah, you win the pawn back. You keep your extra pawn. You know, at some point may consider rook a1. No, black is still in pretty decent shape here. Hikaru taking his time, realizing that this is an important moment. And this is where he really excels. You know, these are the moments he senses that he's on the cusp of taking over the initiative, and he generally plays with tremendous accuracy. Queen d2 played. David has to find c6. Not an easy move to play, allowing c takes d6.
I guess, yeah, because you don't really want to play knight f6 and give up the f7 pawn. Maybe you can afford to do that because after knight f6, bishop f7, there could be move like d5 and the bishop is kind of caught behind enemy lines, and rook to d3 can happen. But yeah, the move c6 looks more challenging.
For sure. You can also throw in rook a1 here, but I don't see how that changes much. White can always play rook c1. Black is not going to gain control over the first rank. So I don't think the trade necessarily favors anyone.
Right.
He plays rook a1.
Danya, sorry, the Arjun Erigaisi game is fascinating.
Going there.
Check out this game.
What is this?
It's winning for white. That's what it's
winning. Yeah, because first thing I notice is king takes c7, queen g5 wins the piece. Okay, but what isn't hanging here?
Everything's hanging. C3, C2, the bishop on e7, the knight h7 is pinned. But this was the Sicilian Grand Prix attack. And players at this level, they don't really play it very often. Gawain Jones does, and he even wrote a book about it. But for the most part, 2650, 2700 players, they don't play it. And it goes to show you need to learn your lines because F5 at this early stage, it's super dangerous for black.
Yeah, this move, and maybe more players are going to pick this up after this game. This was a glowing advertisement.
Danya, go back, if we can, to move 5, please.
Yeah.
So white plays bishop b5, black plays bishop d7, and then white plays bishop c4. This is just the Gawain Jones method, where you give black a tempo that seems counterintuitive, but you prevent black from playing e6, d5 ever because the bishop is in the queen's path.
Yeah, that's right. It does seem counterintuitive. You're helping black develop, but I'm aware of this as well. This is much more dangerous than people give this credit for, even GMs. And like you said, neglecting to study the Grand Prix attack is a mistake. But although white is winning objectively, it's incredibly hard to make heads or tails of this position. I wonder if Gawain Jones' book comes with an Advil, stapled to the back of it. What is happening here? I guess you should just play he takes f5. And knight takes f5. It appears that the correct path is to go rook ab1, queen takes e3, and now rook takes f5. And the point of rook ab1 is to get this rook away from the queen's purview. Although even this is winning because you just go back to, no. Here you got mated.
Exactly.
You have to go king f2 here, and now you're still winning, but this is quite a bit messier.
But Arjun, he is one of the absolute best in the world at calculating positions just like this. And if he sees that there's a checkmate at the end of the the line, he will in fact play it. So E takes F5, followed by Rook takes F5. It looks completely winning, and I think that's what he will do.
Yeah, if this was the 3-minute game, I would assign far more practical chances to Alexei. But Arjun knows that if he finds the correct decision here, he can probably win the game even with 2 minutes. Although that's a pretty dangerous, position to be in. I think he's going to find EF5 or Rook AB1.
Agreed. And well, there's so many fascinating games going on. 5-minute Caruana also looks completely winning with a huge attack. So
this is over D5.
Yeah, just the pawns run, can't stop him. And Black's king is wide open, and White's king doesn't look the safest, but there are no black pieces attacking you.
Maybe throw in G3, but that is a sad attempt at counterplay.
There's E6 after that, threatening Queen E5 check, threatening Queen E4 check.
I think that's going to happen. Fabi's going to go E6 here. Yeah, this is...
There's nothing that Black can really do. And it's funny because it's even material, but Black is completely busted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is even material, isn't it? It's even hard to conceptualize it that way because all of Black's pawns are so lame. It literally looks like White has more pawns than Black. Fabi is not letting this one slip. And a big win. Fabi was on 4 points, and he basically needs to run the field in the last couple rounds if he is to stand any chance.
Mm-hmm. And, we see this standings on the side of the screen here. Many players having a good performance thus far, but 5 out of 7, he'll be in great shape. So he should be able to convert this one without too much difficulty.
Mm-hmm. Queen D4 check is the most clinical win. And then ultimately you're going to take the Rook with check inevitably. He's going to see that Queen D4, King G8, throw in a check on C8, very important. Force the king onto the 7th rank. And then at the very least, you can take the Rook.
So the king has to go to G6 is what you're saying after Queen D4 check?
Yes, but then you give a discovery.
Oh, gosh.
King H7, and I'm sure this is winning. Oh, you can even make a knight.
Yeah. Yeah, you can. Can you just...
You can do anything you want. Rook G6 check. Literally, when you have promotion on the table like that, you could do whatever.
I was wondering if you could just promote because there's no checkmate.
In which case?
Like you play Queen E4 and promote to a...
Oh, lol. Yeah, you can, can't you? Just Queen D1, Queen E1.
Exactly.
Okay, everything wins. Fabi is going down this line. Big win for Fabi. Let's quickly switch back to Hikaru's game, see how that one's going.
Okay.
And okay, that one's a draw.
Yes.
Very
clearly.
Hikaru's still trying some shenanigans, though. He still wants to win. He's going to go E4.
If he can get a pass pawn, he should try. Or King E5, King F6. Be very careful for the Black king.
Oh, he's going to try. You better believe it. And you better believe that he's won positions like this before. Rook C3 was the safest there, forcing the king back.
Mm-hmm. And he wants Rook E1. He wants to play E4.
Although Black could take there and trade, and I think that's still a draw. The H pawn is the worst pawn to have in these pawn endgames.
Yeah.
Okay, Rook F2. And now you can give a bunch of side checks if you want.
Nice. Rook A4 is a nice move. Just go Rook A5 check.
Trapped.
Yeah, go back.
Wait a minute.
Can Black try to...
White has to be very careful because King D4, King F6, Robert, and the Rook is arrested.
Yeah.
Whoa, you got to go King E6 here and, call this game off.
It's like...
You got to declare peace right now.
I've been trying to win, but I've gone a little bit too far. It's close.
Right.
But yeah, here we'll see a repetition from Paravian.
Yeah, David, there's no way that Black can attack this Rook. And the threat of E takes F5 forces Black to keep repeating the position.
And yeah, this is just repetition time.
Yes.
And thus we can move on elsewhere.
Well, let's see if Arjun is converting successfully. It appears that he is. He has given up the Rook on A1. Nothing remains of White's queen side, but that doesn't matter.
Knight B5, yeah. What's the material count? It's an extra exchange for Black. That's exactly what the material is. It's an extra Rook for Black for a knight. So just trying to...
It's about to be 2 pieces for a Rook, though.
Yeah, and the king on E2 is surprisingly safe, and the king on B6, unsurprisingly, is not very safe.
But what if it runs to a5? How are you going to checkmate it there? Alexi called Svidler and was like, you had this before. Where did you hide your king?
So you're saying rook f8, for example?
For example.
Okay.
Oh my God. Now there's rook takes b7.
Queen e7, queen e7. Yeah.
Brilliant. He plays it.
That's the only move for white is rook takes b7.
Because black is threatening checkmate. And rook b7, king a5. Oh my goodness, Robert, this is insane. So you take these pawns, right? And then knight takes f8 is the move.
Oh, knight d7.
And rook c7 mate. Unbelievable.
Wow.
You have to find all of that, and he's got 2 minutes on the clock, and he's going to get checkmated if he doesn't find it.
He's going to find it because of that, but it's so much easier to spot when you know you're completely winning. He feels like he should be. Step one complete. Also, queen e1 check might also be winning right here, but go for the absolute win. Knight takes f8. Now
or compromise. Go back to b7 and then go queen e1.
Okay. I can see him playing queen e1. There it is.
There it is. This is completely winning. He's got too many extra pieces. He's still basically mating the king. Whoa, Alexi forgetting about his rook. He just forgot it was there. And there's going to be resignation.
That was such an evil laugh from you.
Well, it was a mirthful laugh.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to celebrate Alexi's, but it's just funny how so many pieces have been hanging. And finally, when the smoke clears, you're inertial. You're still in I don't care that there are pieces hanging mode, right? And then all of a sudden having to care that an exchange is hanging is a pretty difficult thing to switch to. But of course, white black was completely lost anyway.
Right. So just
completely lost.
I think queen e1 check. He doesn't, with not too much time on the clock, he didn't want to find the forced checkmate if he could get to a position that he knew was winning with plenty of time remaining. So checkmate is forced here, and that's why we saw resignation. And what's happening here? Gusenov, who we haven't even spoken about today, is at 4 out of 6. And with the black pieces here, unless he gets checkmated or loses on time, I just noticed the clock situation, he is looking to go to 5.
He's going to win. Gusenov is a great bullet player. He's incredibly experienced. He's been around for decades online. He was one of the first online blitz players who was really distinguished himself.
Is he and keep pushing his pawn?
Queen f4 comes to me. Yeah, he just keeps pushing because that bishop on a1 is toast. But what now? Queen d1 maybe? King f2?
Then bishop c5?
Yay! King f3. Queen d3. Goodbye. Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where even if you trade queens, if there's possibilities for black to still win there because of the extra pawn and, bishop c5, here comes queen d3.
g3. Vladislav, though, he's doing a great job of not getting mated yet.
Keyword, yet.
King h2, forced.
Bishop d6.
King.
Queen f3. No moves.
h4. Brr.
What a brave choice you've made there.
Oh, yeah. But what is the actual, and then maybe black's king goes to g4.
Well, bishop c5 is a pretty big threat right now.
Yeah, small. What are you talking big threat? Stop over dramatizing. It's okay. It's just checkmate. It's fine. Nothing white can't survive.
Yeah, this one, there's no moves. Okay, king h6, king h8. But king h6 is queen d2 check. You just have to watch out in case you accidentally walk into mate.
Gloria Gaynor, cue the song. Hold your head up high and you will survive.
Well, it looks like black isn't even going to be down on time anymore.
One more trick, bishop e5. And then try to activate the queen through the c file.
Okay, queen f1. Ooh. Queen f5 is mate. Nice. Bishop g1.
Bishop f2, E3. Queen g1, you know the drill.
I knew he was going to play bishop e3, though.
Very Russian school of chess. Very Soviet school of chess right there.
Right, just instead of checkmate, look for better.
Right. Exactly.
And
okay.
Spoiled for choice. Are we done with this round here? No, we still games going on.
Do we? Yeah, we do. We have Ray against Etienne, and Etienne is about to get flagged.
How does Ray have 2 points?
That I'm as surprised as you are. Well, he's got 3 now.
But I would expect Ray to be near the top. And that's how strong the tournament is. So
yeah,
Ray, unfortunately not his day, but a fantastic player. What?
Oh my!
Okay,
God.
It looks like Bibi.
Flagged.
Oh my gosh, Bibisara was completely winning.
She had 2 queens on the board, and black is 0.
And she promoted both of them in the last like 5 moves.
She had three
queens.
3 queens.
No way.
Now Anton could have taken one of them, but instead he goes for the attack. I like knight takes e4 as if nothing's the matter. Okay, just taking a pawn. Unbelievable. That must hurt. And the games are done.
Unfortunate for Bibisara, but she is always in any game, and unfortunately not enough time for her. But it is time for us to take a very short break. We'll be back in a minute for more from the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. Many of the faces you see in the field today take part in Title Tuesday. There are twice the event every Tuesday, 8 a.m. Pacific, and then a second at 2 p.m. Pacific time. And the prizes have been tripled. So $5,000 in weekly prizes, $250,000 across the year. You do not want to miss that fun. And we don't want to miss any more fun here in the Rapid Chess Championship because, Danya, we have seen a familiar position, have we not?
Yeah. You were saying of producing a novelty, a new drawing method. Just kidding. Completely understandable from Hikaru's perspective because he was in clear first before this round, essentially guarantees himself qualification, and he's going to be white in the last round. He's probably going to make a quick draw, and that is his ticket to the final 8 tomorrow.
Yeah, he's in all likelihood already qualified 6 out of 8. Maybe people can get to 6 out of 9. His tie breaks will undoubtedly be better. So 500 Caruana with the white piece against Arjun Erigaisi. Now, they had a very interesting battle at the Mikhail Tal Memorial Blitz Tournament at the Grand Swiss, where I believe they split games 1-1, but Arjun had a smashing victory with the white pieces in that game. But here, Fabiano takes the first move. And now in this position, Danya, it's a 2 bishops advantage, if you want to call it that, for black. But that bishop on a6, that light square bishop, is oftentimes without a target.
Yeah, black has some structural deficiencies to resolve, development to complete, but Arjun is doing all of that very nicely after knight c6. Okay, development is basically complete. He can put 1 rook on e8, 1 rook on c8. Bishop on a6 is not the greatest, but it's controlling some squares. And you can tuck it back on b7, which he does. I think Arjun is a great position here.
Yeah, he does.
Targets, solid. Development is good.
Yeah, any problems for black are in the long term. So if you can trade the minor pieces, except for the bishop on b7, and then white gets to keep a knight, that's when the problems start to arise. But for now, that's not much of an issue. That's very far away. And h3, good move, creating luft. Also a retreat for the bishop. And rook to c1, I would consider for white, either after trading on e8 or immediately, but I think black is just trying to force all the rooks off the board, though the d5 pawn needs to have an eye kept on it.
Yeah, and as for the bishop on b7, as I like to say on my stream, not all pieces need to be fill in the blank, distributing the COVID vaccine, climbing Mount Everest, right? The bishop, Tarash said that one piece stands badly, the whole position stands badly, but you can compare the bishop to b7 on b7 with the knight on f3, Robert. You like to point this out. The pawn on f6 is restricting the knight. When you look at this position, you notice that the bishop is bad, but white's pieces aren't great either. They're not coordinated particularly well. There's no targets to attack. So it's kind of an illusion that one bad piece here defines the position because it doesn't.
Right. And we tend to think of pieces, try to envision the future for them. We can see the knights rerouting at some point, even though it's not available to Fabiano just now. I don't see a future for the bishop. And I think that's why I have this tendency to look at this and say, I like white's chances going forward, but you're 100% correct. White's knights are not doing much of anything at the moment. The knight on f3 in particular is stuck in place. And the D4 pawn is a bit loose in some positions. So the knight f3 kind of has to stay, even if it doesn't want to.
And do you know what bad bishops defend?
Good pawns.
Very good. You pay attention, my friend.
I definitely do. By the way, quickly, because the game's going to end soon, Jeffrey Zhang against Vida Gujarati. That one is as bad of an opening disaster as you'll ever see from a player of Jeffrey's strength.
A Ponciani, wait a minute, not a Ponciani, what the heck is C3 in this position?
Don't ask me.
What is he doing?
Just losing.
Robert, I'm a big fan of Jeffrey's father.
Yes.
Super sweet guy, but I think he might have Jeffrey might have had to go to the bathroom or something, and he told Mr. Zhang, all right. you I know you've always wanted to play Vidit. Come on, this is your chance. I'll recover when I'm back.
It's just unfathomable. This is Jeffrey Zhang we're talking about. I mean,
but what is this? What is C3? How can this even be a pre? This may be a pre-move because he expected bishops, but it's not like knight f6 is some dirty move. Right?
No,
it's not like Vidit played d5 or something. This is normal.
He played C3 in 8/10 of a second. So you're right. It was essentially a pre-move. And, well, he's going to pre-move his way to an early loss.
You can literally resign here. I mean, the knight is coming in. C6 is a threat. White is also down a pawn. 2 pawns. Ugh.
Yeah.
I can't even look at this position. This is too painful.
No, let's go away. Let's go away from this. It does hurt too.
One thing.
Yes.
I was going to propose bishop takes b7. After knight d3 check, there's just one trick. Takes d3.
Mm-hmm. And then
if you take, you lose your queen on g2. But of course, black has knight f3 check. Anyways, enough. Let's get out of here. Skedaddle. Svidler, on the other hand, has a back to normalcy. The Caracan Oasis.
I tend to like the look of this position at first glance for white, because if we look at the queen side, I mean, white has the d4 square under his control. The b5 square is available, and the b4 square isn't available for black's knight. So I would say the dynamics in the queen side tend to favor white here, which should be no surprise considering there's an extra pawn if you cut the board from the A to the C file. So bishop e4, natural looking move. I would improve the knight from e1, go to f3, then try to hop into d4. And I think that white just has a pleasant edge.
Yeah, and Svidler loves these kinds of maneuvering games, but with a certain edge to it, right? The position has all of its pieces, and at some point, black could play f6. Even now, I would very strongly consider it if I'm David Anton. That's also in his style. He likes playing provocatively. And then the position could become quite a bit sharper than it currently is.
Yeah, f6 is the move you need to play. It's sort of a French idea to open up the board, because otherwise white will be able to press forward without any difficulty. Although the move f6 here, let's say white takes on f6, how are you going to take back?
Well, let's say I take back with if I take back with a knight, then that allows this nasty move knight g5. So probably I should take back with the bishop. Right. I wouldn't even rule out gf6, by the way. That's a possibility.
Sure. And I was thinking after bishop f6, I was playing bishop d3, because your bishop on e4 is your best piece. If I trade it off, I've also cleared the e file, so I can put a rook on e1 next. And it just still seems like white's pieces are in better shape. And if black ever plays e5, you may just lose a pawn immediately. But more importantly, you're stuck with this isolated pawn, and white has the square in front of it blockaded. Yeah,
that's very well explained. And we can understand why David is having reservations about f6. And if he doesn't play f6, well, how does he improve his position? Because Svidler has a very clear pathway: knight d4, king h1, maybe just a neutral move like rook ac8, but he's struggling to find something.
Yeah, well, he's going to have reservations for time travel soon if he doesn't make a move. But
time travel cafe.
Yeah, it's honestly, that's kind of a good idea. Do we think somebody out there can make that? I would visit the time travel cafe. I'm always in time travel.
What kind of dishes does it serve? Spaghetti and 30-second spaghetti?
Microwavable meals. That's it. Only.
Right.
Well, the knight went to b6. Maybe knight c4 is on the agenda at some point, but I feel like knight d2 played. The knight on b3. not doing all that much. Bring it back to D2, where knight takes E4 is an idea. So black is moving back. And
I think Svidler's going to go king H1 here.
King H1 looks like a great move. And maybe G4 at some point.
It's just so very Russian to just improve the position of the king, tuck it away. And now he goes queen E1. Makes me look bad. He wants his queen on G3 instead. That makes a lot of sense as well. And for David, at some point, if he procrastinates too long, he won't be able to play F6 anymore because white's going to have too many pieces on the king side. So if he's going to do it, I would do it now. And he does.
So E takes F6. You're taking with what piece now?
Well, my inclination is always to take with the bishop. Somehow that aesthetically looks more pleasing. And David is on the same page.
So there are a couple moves, and bishop B5 was chief amongst them, but I was trying to think, where do I want my pieces? The bishop on E2 not doing much. Bishop B5 isn't threatening to take on C6, but the E6 pawn becomes a target. You put a rook on E8, then your knight on C6 is pinned. The knight on D2 actually could venture to B3 and C5 at some point, or to D4 as you're highlighting. So yeah, this feels like the position is about to open up, and black has the pawn weaknesses, but the king on G1, if it doesn't tuck itself away on H1, it could be in the line of fire because the F pawn is so advanced.
And in certain situations, you might want to take on B6. And the fact that the queen recaptures with check could be very significant from a tactical standpoint. So do you make that investment? And do you go king H1, or do you do something more concrete? Lots to think about here for Svidler. Both players now under 5 minutes. We'll keep an eye on this game, but shall we have a quick look around at some of the other top boards?
Sure. Let's see. Where can we go to now?
We've got Fabi's game, which has taken quite the turn. Now it looks like Fabi's the one pushing for victory. Whoa, bishop B8. What?
Looks like a very good move. Just go after the A7, and then once A7 falls.
I didn't even notice that the knight on E3. I didn't understand that knight F5 actually is based on a tactic. Ooh. That I also missed.
So knight F5, bishop B3 is probably 4. So bishop B8 takes A4, takes A7, takes B5, takes B6. White's up two pawns there.
It's winning. He's going to win this.
So it looks like, just based on what we're seeing here, that at some point, Arjun just lost the D5 pawn.
Mm-hmm. And then Fabi very astutely fixed black's pawns on the dark squares. Once these pawns are traded, white can just fully focus all of his efforts on converting the 2 extra pawns in the center. Even if the engine could hold a draw here, Robert, with 4 minutes on the clock, this is, in my opinion, completely unsalvageable.
Yeah, no chance. The only thing that could go wrong for white at this point is if you, G4 here just looks great. But I was going to say that if you give up your knight for the dark square bishop, right? If we get opposite colored bishops, then there will be some chances. But Fabiano, he of course understands that. He's not going to allow it. Oh, bishop C5 forces the bishop.
Force the bishop trade.
That's
this
immediately
is winning on the spot.
And look at this, bishop C5 there. Pawns here, king D5. Can I play C6? Yeah.
Beautiful. And whichever way you take, you get quote unquote forked. The point is not to win the piece. It's to transition into a winning punning, because remember, you're 2 pawns up. Brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's actually a really beautiful sequence.
It is. It is.
So Fabi's thinking he plays G4 and he's going to take and play bishop C5.
That's exactly what he was calculating. Those wheels were spinning. Okay, this is important. If he doesn't do it, Arjun could set up something resembling a blockade. 3 minutes on the clock. Wait a minute.
Okay. And there it is.
Does it. And we're going to see C6 on the board, I think.
Yeah, C6 is a very important move. And it could still be winning for white even without the move C6, because you just go king H2, king G3, king up the board, and you're up a pawn. And the knight can attack pawns on both colors. The bishop cannot defend that. So this should still be winning regardless, but C6 is just such a fun move. You can't pass up an opportunity to make that choice.
No, you cannot. And Arjun, he's thinking, but there's nothing he can do. The moment of truth, and Fabi took about a second. That's it, 97. And the rest is elementary, my dear Watson.
Well, as long as you're referring to me in such friendly language, I will let you call me Watson.
All right. We have a deal. Now, just humor me here for a second. King F3, King E5. I guess just King E3. What's the exact winning method here? You just induce Zugzwang and then you keep inching your king up?
Yes. Exactly
and
that.
And if F5, you can play F4 check probably.
And I know why you're asking the question, right? Because some people will think, oh, I'm up material. Let me just trade pawns. But the problem is if you trade the wrong pawns, if you're left with G and H versus H, so if the F pawns get traded here, they're often positions where black can just bring the king back and try to hold a draw. So you need to be careful. Fabiano, I mean, he is way, way, way too strong to not win an endgame like this. But if he had, say, 1 minute rather than 3 minutes, I think a mistake could possibly happen there.
I think players tend to falsely assume that any pawn endgame with extra material is easily winning. And there are so many tricks in these pawn endgames and so many theoretical positions to be aware of. Here, I think H4 is the best move. And black is in Zugzwang because if the king moves back, we go king F4. If black goes F5, the simplest is to go F4 and G5. And once the protected passer is established, now the game is over because the king can't be in two places at once. It can't stop king B4 and stop the passer at the same time. There it is.
Pushing the pawn. Yeah, this is a very straightforward technique from Caruana. And if he wins this, he gets to 6 out of 8. And Danya, last week, and there's the victory, Arjun needed to draw that final game against Jan Nepomuchy. And unfortunately for him, he lost what was on the verge of being a draw. So he's now at 5 out of 8. He still has a chance, right, if he wins his last round game, but it could be 2 weeks in a row for him where he just misses the cut.
Yeah, nerves start to come in. You know how many points you have. He got out to a great start against Fabi. He was definitely better with the black pieces after 15 moves or so, but Fabi, he's got so much experience. He's so solid, and he pulls through with a huge win. What we have on the board now is Haik Martirosyan against Fedoseev. Both of them have 4.5. Robert, one of them has to win essentially both games to have a shot at qualifying. Fedoseev seems to be much better, but white has this weird fortress thing set up. And
more time. So these are the positions where you look for a knockout. You spend 30 seconds of your remaining minute and a half, and then you're down to a minute and you're scrambling. So white is actually up a pawn, though it's a double A pawn. But the black king, while safe for the moment on H7, I could see that king coming under fire.
Yeah, and I was zoning out because I was inventing jingles for the Time Trouble Cafe. Like little songs that involve the players. Where does Vladimir Fedoseev hang out in the morning? He gets a coffee at the Time Trouble Cafe.
Nice.
When you've got 30 seconds, you've got a game against Hikaru coming up. Where do you go for lunch? The Time Trouble Cafe. Anyway, okay, back to the game.
You know what? You have to eat for breakfast there, right?
Career will have to be on hold.
At the Time Trouble Cafe, you have to order instant oatmeal. I feel like that's the breakfast you must have there. So white's going after the F7 pawn, the knight on E1 coming in handy, stopping the pawn from pushing to C2. And here H5 check is not out of the question. It's either next move or in the near future because it forces the king to make a decision. And instead he goes Rook C6 check.
And Rook C7. But black can never push this pawn. Knight D1 though, attacking F2. Now he can push it.
Now knight F2? And bishop
knight
D4?
F2, knight F2, bishop D4 picks off the knight and then... Oh, white is going to be on the ropes there.
Look at it.
Will Vladimir see it? He does.
He does.
Ooh.
And there's going to be a mating net potentially being weaved in this position because the king, if it goes to H3, then there'll be bishop G1, Rook H2 checkmate idea. So be very, very careful right now.
Check, king G6, Rook D7, probably the best move.
Bishop
making contact with the bishop.
C2?
Whoa, C2, Rook takes D4, Rook takes F4. Oh my goodness, what a tactic.
Wait, that looks very dangerous because white's king is going to be sort of cut along the third rank. So it was bishop F6.
Rook D6, very important now to pin the bishop and then swing the rook over to C6. But white has to defend extremely accurately here.
Right, the threat is C2, bishop B2, rook takes F4 in some sequence. And Danya, I'm going to point it out because dark square bishop, light square corner on H1. So, okay, well, the pawn's gone, so it doesn't matter anyway, but that's what I was just trying to point out.
Yeah, exactly. Rook F3 is going to come and there will be problems for the white king.
And
okay.
How do you even stop this?
You can't. I have F4 as a threat. There's too many threats and not enough time.
And now it's Martirosyan who's down to 50 seconds. So still a little bit ahead in the clock. And we saw him win time scrambles in previous games, but no, not here.
Rook F1.
Rook F1.
Goodbye. Rook A1. It's easy. Rook A1. You take a 3 Fedosseyev. Took no time and just escape the checks and you win.
Right. King G6 is the easiest. And that was really accurate play because he could have promoted to a queen and been up a bishop, but that would have given white huge chances to survive.
Indeed. And Vladimir Fedosseyev with a huge win. He gets onto 5.5 out of 8. He basically, probably because of his tie breaks, has to win the last round. And Hikaru's in, but all of the other spots, Robert, will be in question. I'm trying to weave some sort of stalemate. He still has a G-pawn, though. No, that's not happening. He abandoned his hopes and dreams. Svidler won. Wow.
Svidler's doing great. You know who else is crushing it? Is Dreyev. Dreyev is 5.5 points.
Wow. So he could qualify with a win.
Wait, what's that knight doing on H7?
Demchenko and Donchenko.
I always mix them up.
Well, it looks like Donchenko is going to win.
Mm-hmm.
Although he's playing
no time.
He's not pre-moving.
You got to move.
Oh, yeah, he's going to win. He pulls it out, but that was close.
Yeah, that was too close for comfort. That is the final game of the 8th round. You can see the leaderboard in front of you. Everything to play for many of these players. Hikaru Nakamura, Fabiano Caruana, they're pretty much assured of qualification. The rest is up for grabs. So the people you see on screen in front of you as we head to break, they are the players working their way towards tomorrow's knockout. For now, we're going to take a short breather, and we'll be back for the final round here at the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. And we return here for the dramatic final round of today's Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase here in the Swiss. These players have all to play for. It is round 9, qualification spots up for grabs. And we have the game between Hikaru and Big Fish. And Big Fish is Vladimir Fedosseyev. Danya, it's a tough position to be in if you are Fedosseyev, because if Hikaru offers you a draw, you're like, that's a good result, the black piece against Hikaru, but you don't know how the tiebreaks are going to fall at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think given that Fedosseyev has 5.5, his tie breaks are probably inferior to those players who have 6. So he kind of has to win, I think. I get the sense that, you know, he might squeak by with a draw, but it's unlikely. But he already has a pretty unpleasant position. And Hikaru has managed to get this into a risk-free endgame where he's got the initiative. He's threatening c4. So how does Hikaru do this? He just channels the game into exactly the right direction.
And by the way, Fabiano Caruana has drawn his final game against David Paravian. No surprises there from the opening point of view, but that game is over. Both players likely to qualify, but Fabiano is assured of qualification. And your question about this game here, it looks very worrisome for the Big Fish because his king is on e7. It looks safe, but that rook on a8, there could be a knight c7 at some point. White has this 3-on-2 pawn majority over on the queen side. You could just retreat your knight to d4 here, even though c3 to c4 is possible just because of tactics.
Better say about her to draw.
Ooh, he did.
I don't think Hikaru's taking it. I think Hikaru believes that he cannot lose the position after knight bd4. On the other hand, Hikaru guarantees qualification to the draw. Nope, he goes c4. He didn't even really think about it.
And Hikaru wants the top seed. He wants the white pieces in every rapid game that he plays. Because remember, there is a difference depending on your seeding. The higher seed, the better finisher here in the Swiss gets the white pieces in the one game of rapid that they play tomorrow. And so you can see the format. Thank you to our producer for bringing that on screen here. That's going to be the format for tomorrow's knockout. So having the number one overall seed is your version, Chess's version of the home field advantage.
Yeah, it's a pretty big deal. And a completely reasonable decision by Hikaru, who just doesn't lose these types of positions. And what I honestly hate about having this with black is the bishop on c8 is sort of permanently stuck behind the pawns. And the move b6 is just too weakening, right? It weakens the c6 knight. It's hard to make this move without any repercussions. But Vladimir doing a good job so far. He's gotten his rook in. He gets his bishop to d7, maybe tuck it away on e8. Okay, very solid here for black.
And then a3 comes. Yeah, you're going to see that expansion as you're pointing out. So
how scary is it?
It just doesn't feel pleasant, even if it's not objectively scary. Like b4, c5 to follow. Your pieces are shut out of the game. The d6 square might be whites for the taking. So I definitely prefer Hikaru's position, and I certainly prefer his time.
Wesley, by the way, I think has also drawn, as has Dreyev.
Okay.
So 5 spots currently occupied by Fabi, who's got 6.5. And then Hikaru has 6 out of 8. Of course, he is yet to complete his game, but already 3 players with 6 out of 9.
And Dreyev's tiebreaks are bad. I just looked. They're really not good. So for him to make a quick draw, he might be the one looking at the action tomorrow from the spectator seat, because his tiebreaks are not good if other people tie or, of course, pass it.
It really depends on how the cards fall with respect to the other players who have 5.5. Now, Fedorsev showing us how scary the b4 idea is. He's willing to create a gaping hole on b5 in order to stop b4. And I think that's a reasonable choice, Robert. I think by establishing this bishop on c5, the move knight b5 itself can be dealt with quite easily. Black could even go a4 and knight a5, kind of a typical idea. And don't fall asleep. On the queen side, white's position could start to crumble ever so slowly in a situation like this.
It's a very good point. When you have a pawn on c4 rather than back on c2, some of your light squares are going to be vulnerable. So Hikaru may be bopping his head, trying to motivate himself in this position. And he is, of course, doing perfectly well here. But Fedorsev, turn after turn, is handling all of Hikaru's ideas and threats with very strong play of his own.
And historically, Vladimir has been very good against Hikaru. He's held it together in long blitz matches. And there's something about Vladimir's style, that combative, doesn't let Hikaru do what he wants to do kind of style, that has served him very well in their head-to-head matches. So I'm very curious to see how this endgame continues to unfold. Hikaru taking his time. Maybe he'll end up defaulting to a move like Rook HE1. But to me, that will be a sign that the initial wave of attack is behind black. Right? If Hikaru defaults to a move like that, that means he doesn't know exactly how to continue improving.
That's right. And I'm just keeping an eye out on some of the other games as well, Danya, because we do have everyone trying to qualify here in addition to Fedorsev. There's this Peter Svidler, and you just pull up the game. He's better with the black pieces. And if there's one player in this field that I wouldn't want to have this closed maneuvering play against, it's Svidler, because he has so much experience and he is just a phenomenal player in any position, obviously, but especially ones like this. And it's not Arjun's style. This is not his style at all. He is, as we saw in that Grand Prix attack, he loves open play, dynamic chess, and this position has anything but that.
Yes, Svidler is going to maneuver you to death. He's got full control of the open A file. Again, the only open file, and black controls it. Arjun dropping the bishop back to e3. He's obviously threatening to take the knight and then take the pawn. Svidler could support the knight with queen c7 or queen c8, but I think his queen came from there. So there might be some sort of a one-time repetition. I don't think Svidler is going to repeat again, though. I mean, both of these players need to win, basically. Arjun needs to win to even give himself a chance, depending on his tiebreaks. And if Svidler wins, he basically guarantees qualification.
Well, I'm going to ask you a psychological question.
Mm-hmm.
So you know that Arjun needs to win. So why not repeat? Because Arjun probably won't repeat.
Yeah, but you don't know that for sure. Arjun might throw his hands up and say, all right, there's no way I'm winning this position against Svidler. I might as well try to ruin his qualification chances.
I'm just trying to play the man and not the board, Danya.
You're right. Arjun goes h5 and knight g4 instantly.
Yeah, this is
Bishop
a
g5,
bad situation for Bishop g5, then queen d8 back.
D8.
I mean,
Bishop on c2 is also terrible. It's just sort of sitting there doing nothing, no prospects. Black is dominating on both sides of the board. That's never a good thing in the right Lopez.
No. And as you're pointing out that, you know, White's only counterplay was in the form of that bishop takes c5 kind of idea, keeping Black a little frozen. Once the bishops get traded, now the knight on c5 is the best piece on the board. Well, the rook on
really
a8,
good.
The rook on a8 could have something to say about that, but otherwise, the knight on c5 is the best piece.
Svidler is so good. He's just classy, and in these positions, he's got no equal. He plays quickly, confidently. He's just squeezing the life out of Arjun here.
He is indeed. And, well, I mean, this is not a good news for Arjun, who had a great start and has stumbled a little bit down the stretch. And, all right, just take that bishop on e3.
Yeah. No, now he has the two bishops, and now comes the bishop to g4. Arjun's like, I finally got rid of that knight. Oh, there's the bishop. And if knight h2, Robert, look at this, bishop g5. Goodbye, queen.
You're a bully.
Oh, I know. It's Svidler. It's Svidler, not me. I'm just Svidler's messenger.
Okay.
Well, if you have to make a move like rook b1, that ain't good.
No, because b3 doesn't really solve all your problems. Like, you're going to try to play b3 and you'll still have a c3 issue. Black is so much more active. Rook a2. I would just throw my rook up the board here. I could see some universe where you might want to use the h file exactly, but rook a2 is where my focus is right now.
I agree. Although I have a soft spot for starting with queen h8 and, you know, kind of putting into effect the maxim, the threat is stronger than the execution, keeping Arjun in suspense. He takes on f3. Interesting. Maybe he wants to activate this bishop and put it on g5. He wants to put it on h4. Okay, well, but what if the knight drops back?
Probably have to, but he heard what you were saying about how that bishop on c2 now in d1 is so bad. So you can be left with that bishop against my knight on c5. But yeah, you can't really afford to trade too much if you're Black, because at some point you need to break through. But knight f1, where's the knight going? There's not too much of a future for it.
Yeah, no future at all. Just stuck in the airport. Queen f6, Svidler going for the queen trade, but not in order to make a draw. That queen trade is in order to further soften White's defenses. Now e4 is going to hang. Rook a2 still on the cards, Robert. This is so hard to defend. Although Arjun has been doing a great job of it so far. He hasn't collapsed yet.
He is not, and he is a little bit ahead on the clock, but Svidler still with 4.5 minutes. He's been keeping pace, and now rook a2 looks great.
Here it comes. King can drop back to e7 at some point, just chill in the center.
And there's an idea to play b4 for Black at some point. Like, if you can put your rook on a2, maybe play b4, knight a6, you know, just take this pawn back kind of thing. Oh, the evaluation went all the way down. Oh, bishop takes c3.
Now that is just nasty. Bishop takes c3 is unstoppable. If you drop back to d1, in comes the knight.
Oh, wow.
Or knight takes e4. This is resignable. Holy smokes, what a game by Svidler.
I mean, he saw all these ideas so quickly, right? We were trying to come up with individual moments where he could find some strategy. He's like, I don't need to think. Bishop d2.
He's probably saying on his stream how lucky he got.
He's so humble.
I love Svidler. King g5, probably the most combative, although you can just drop back to e7 as well.
Mm-hmm.
But king g5 is more accurate.
Yeah, you just attack the knight. And, okay, you can play bishop takes e3, and then White can't move.
That is true. Why don't we get our king to g3 here? Maybe Svidler is saying. Although Arjun could meet king g4 with king f2.
But then knight a4.
Ugh. Get this position out of here.
Hey, you're the one controlling the board. You're the only one between the two of us who can get the position out of here.
Okay, fine. I'm getting it out of here. I'm going to trust Svidler. Let's check back into Hikaru against Fedoseev, the big game. And Drum roll, please.
Okay.
Hikaru doing a great job here. He's better.
Yeah, the isolated E6 pawn, not good news. The B6 pawn to target, right? We talked about pawn chains. Pawn chains only as strong as their base pawns. If the pawn was an A7 rather than A5, that would be a much safer pawn chain. But because of the B6 pawn as the base, it's much easier to attack.
Yeah, big fish not feeling like such a big fish here. His pieces sort of scattered all over the board. The bishop looks nice. Rook C8 is a good move. Preparing to meet bishop takes B6 with Rook B8 with counterplay against B2. But Hikaru, he doesn't have to rush, and he can continue improving his position, which he does. He's so good at this. And the time ticking down. It's time to visit a certain eating establishment. You know what that is. It's beckoning.
Yeah, I mean, Rook E2, calm move play, just defending B2. So B6 is now hanging. Rook B8, if that's your best choice, then White can try to press forward and say you're very passive. And he plays B5. His move will be B4 next, I guess.
Two, though.
Bishop B2 is nice.
Now that wins a pawn. That pawn on A5 cannot be defended. You can't go Rook A8 because that square is defended. Okay, now B4.
Okay.
BA.
Bishop B4 check. Nice. Fine by Hikaru.
But Fedoseev still, his pieces are not bad. And Hikaru will still have to figure out a way to convert. He takes with a pawn. I'm a little bit surprised. But maybe he wants to keep his bishop anchored like that.
And he wants an outside pass pawn. So if he can trade one pair of bishops, then the outside pass pawn will be very powerful. Like Rook D2, try to Bishop C2 kind of stuff. But yeah, Bishop C, Bishop B5 for sure.
Should be 5, definitely
and then,
forced.
And then E5.
Yeah. Fedoseev still hanging in there. King A2, Bishop B3 could be one way to arrange White's pieces.
And then you're start trying to march the pawns up.
Ooh. Scary move to deal with 2 minutes on the clock, trying to undermine that bishop is Hikaru.
I really like that move because with the bishop on D4 stabilized by the pawn E5, it seems like Black has some serious counterplay. But if now you have to worry, will your bishop ever find a real home? And with the king side opening up, you have to watch out for this pawn on G7 and things of that nature. But Fedoseev, he's not to be deterred. Look at him. He's got a great bishop on E5. He has strong piece placement, and he's only down one pawn.
And with 4 bishops on the board, both sides have to be careful not to get caught by a stray bullet, some fork or some tactic. Very, very common. Both kings are a little bit exposed. So care has to be exercised, particularly by Vladimir, who's got quite a bit less time. And for Hikaru, he wants to trade one pair of bishops, Roberts. That would greatly relieve his effort. Even if it wouldn't make the win objectively easier, it would make it easier to play fast.
That's right. So, yeah, Hikaru, I mean, right now, he senses that, he's not winning, but that he can put Fedoseev away with his lead on the clock. So he's trying to organize his pieces in the most challenging way possible. I mean, Rook C2, you already have to think, is that going to be scary? He says, no, King E6. I can just defend this way because there's a Rook C2, there's Bishop D5 possibly.
But then White has the trade that he kind of wanted. He goes Bishop B5, and Hikaru got Fedoseev to spend another 30 seconds. Now he's down to a minute and a half.
Mm-hmm.
King A2 comes to mind, getting the king off of the B file, so precise. And Hikaru is a buzzsaw in these types of endgames.
Bishop A4, one move threat, Rook to D2, just avoid the loss of your rook, and Bishop D5 check to B3 becomes an option. At some point, White's going to need to try and advance this pawn on the queen side, but for now...
Rook E2 creating the threat of a discovery. A wheel starting to come off. If you move the king to the F file, you walk into Rook F2.
Oh my gosh.
Oof.
Bishop C2 forces a pair of bishops off.
Yep, because of the pin. Wow. Incredible play by Hikaru in this endgame.
Yeah, Bishop B5, Bishop B3 check is a problem.
His advantage increasing. No, but now this loses. Rook F2 is coming, and Black's going to lose a piece.
G4.
G4. Misses it. Whoa! G4 won a piece on the spot. Now Fedoseev back into it.
Okay. And watch out for the white king, by the way. If that rook leaves, there could be an issue on the first rank if you can get there.
Somehow Fedoseev has finagled his king all the way to E4. Bishop D4 comes to mind. He trades. I still think Hikaru's going to win, though. Not enough time for Vladimir, and there's this outside passer. He tries desperately to push his pawns, create counterplay. Where is he going with that?
He wants H5, G4, G3, and Bishop F2, something like that.
But it's too slow. Hikaru's A pawn is about to start rumbling up the board.
And it is the wrong pawn, that rook pawn over there. So if all the kingside pawns can get traded, you can even lose your bishop and trade rooks and still hold. But yes, this is not looking good with 46 seconds remaining and the position as dominant as it is for Hikaru.
And here goes the pawn. A5, there's nothing black can do to stop it. A6 is coming. The last line of defense is that bishop on G1 and the rook on 8 combining to cover the A7 square, but that just seems too flimsy to survive for more than a couple of moves. Hikaru is about to win this game.
Bishop C5, trade bishops. Yeah.
King B6, King G2, Rook C2 at the right
Rook
time.
C2 is really important.
Stopping everything defending G2. That's it.
It's over.
Was there ever any doubt once they hit that endgame?
No, not much. Hikaru, too fast.
Almost perfect.
Too strong. And he's going to win today's Swiss portion of the week 2 of the Rapid Chess Championship.
With the exception of missing G4, that was almost a flawless endgame. I mean, he really didn't give... Wait a minute.
Oh, my goodness.
Did he just blunder?
We spoke too soon.
Oh, my goodness. Wait a second. Fedoshev is going to go Rook F7 check.
He has no time, though. Rook F8?
No time. But now he's going to go G3, Robert.
G3.
And what does he do after King C4? What if Hikaru sends his king over to the other side?
King C4, Rook A8? Rook A... Okay, don't go. No, King B7.
He missed it. Oh my God, that's losing.
Oh, he couldn't afford to take.
No, he hadn't. He had to. What did he have to do?
He had to give a check and go back. Or play King G1.
Gonna win.
Oh my goodness.
God. A scare at the end, and Hikaru survives it. Not that he wouldn't have qualified. Oh my lands. That was close. In this position, Robert, he had to go King G1 and just wait. There's nothing Hikaru can do.
Well,
nothing. Because you just give a check when the king reaches F3.
Yeah.
And he would have flagged him probably, though.
You know, he definitely was going to lose in time. That I had no questions about. But, whew, you know, what an almost save. And these games are very important. Okay, well, not anymore. I was going to say David Anton could win. Then he would have a chance to get to 6 points, but he is not winning. And don't take that knight.
So 6 points qualifies.
Oh, but look at this. If D2, knight F1. If D2, knight F1.
Oh, my God. And then you have to make a bishop?
And then knight takes H2, but you probably...
F2, knight G4. Oh, my God. This is crazy.
Wow, what a move. Knight G3.
How do you win this? And Kovalyov is spending a lot of time here. He's down to 17 seconds.
You just have to move like your king. Just go King G4.
Wait a moment. Knight back to F1. Amazing. Oh, my God. You have to...
Oh, stalemate!
He should have made a bishop. He could have flagged him with a bishop.
Oh, my gosh.
Does David Anton... Oh, David Anton is slightly worse tiebreaks. Fedoshev still qualified.
Wait, no.
He didn't.
He didn't. And David Anton qualifies.
Oh,
the stalemate gets him through.
This is unreal.
Oh, my gosh.
He surpasses Fedoshev, poor Vladimir, by less than 1 tiebreak point. And
oh, my goodness.
Auto queen on. Kovalyov is cursed in this tournament.
Yeah, he got checkmated by Anish Giri in an unlosable position.
But how do you draw this endgame? Oh my gosh. How is this even possible?
Because of the wrong rook pawn, Danya.
Robert, D2.
Yeah, no, I'm not denying that there were many easy wins here.
And Kovalyov he would have qualified. He would have gotten 6. He would have qualified.
He would have had actually 5.5 if he had won, I think. But still, he would have been
5.5.
Yeah, but he would have had a chance.
Oh my God!
But Danya, it's about the wrong H pawn with the bishop because let's say instead of D1 equals queen, right? King F2 was played. Then, well, actually no, that doesn't work because you win the knight.
You actually cannot hold King E2.
Sure, knight takes D2. And then this is a draw that I've talked about for years. People refuse to listen, but then it shows up in the game.
Only winning move is D1 bishop. I'm taking a photograph of this position. I have been looking for this for years, a situation where you have to make a bishop or else this is the only correct move. This is amazing. This is why we watch the RCC. I mean, crazy, just crazy.
I love that you're actually taking a photo because you could. You could screenshot it. You could just get the game in the game archive.
No, but I need to go through the process of let me have my moment in the sun. And making a bishop is winning.
Yes.
2 bishops, and it's actually pretty easy. Like in this particular version, white loses the knight. Simply insane.
Could you also, king f2 is knight g4 because it's stalemate, right? So you just go king here. It's so funny.
You king g3 and then king f2, and you make a waiting move, and white has to give up the knight.
Right.
That's it.
Very, very straightforward at this point. But my gosh, what a way to end. And the day is not over. So we just had as wild of a finish as you could ask for. Danya and I, we need to take a moment because we need to compose ourselves, because when we return, we'll bring you the day's Coinbase rapid recap. But for now, Danya and I are going to take a short break. We'll pull up the game of the day and then go through it for you all. So stay tuned. We're back for the conclusion here at today's Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. 8 players have qualified for the knockout of the Rapid Chess Championship, but that will have to wait for tomorrow. Right now, we have our Coinbase Rapid Recap, and there was no choice for us to choose any game but the one between Arjun Erigaisi and Alexi Sarana. And it started out quietly, Danya, but the Grand Prix attack, there's much more bite than initially meets the eye. And the first big decision was when White went bishop to b5 on move 5, because that invites the bishop to d7. And you may think, why would you allow your opponent to develop just to retreat the bishop to c4? But it cuts off Black's access to the d5 square.
Right. This is the modern treatment of the position. It's been recommended by English Grandmaster Gawain Jones, who is one of the leading, probably the leading specialist on the Grand Prix. And what this early course of the game, Robert, shows is that even grandmasters sometimes forget to review some of these lines. They slip through the cracks, and they're a lot more dangerous than people give it credit for. And we saw that almost immediately. In fact, next move by Alexi, e6, and boom, f5. This is where things get real dangerous for Black.
And if we just go back a half move there, we saw that it was pointed knight a5. And that doesn't tell the full story. It's not like you get rid of the bishop on c4 and all is well. Just a quick sample line. Let's say White plays bishop d2, knight takes c4, d takes c4, knight f6, queen e2. White is actually to be preferred in this position, despite the double pawns, despite the bishop pair for Black, because White has so much more control with those 3 pawns on the 4th rank. At any moment, e5 can be played. So Black is quite a bit restricted in such a dynamic.
Indeed. And, well, after e6, White strikes with f5, and Alexi responds improperly. He ignores it. He goes knight g7. But after knight g5, Robert, it becomes clear that the pressure on e6 and f7 has become extreme.
And it's why we need to study our openings, because, you know, as you said, you had to take on f5, and even there, it's very complex and scary for Black. G5 is possible. E takes f5, I was thinking at first for Black, but then White castles, plays queen e1, queen h4, knight g5, and bishop h6 ideas to come. It's very scary. So, Danya, this knight g5 move played by Arjun in the game, what an idea, because e6 is pressurized, f7, the opening of the f-file, it just looks really scary.
Yeah, Alexi does his best, but now he piles on with castles. Not only does this get the king to safety, but he threatens f6. He also threatens to open the f-file and stick a knight on f7. So Alexi taking on f5, doing his best to keep the f-file closed. But what's the drawback of this move? Well, it weakens the h5 square. Arjun wasting no time playing with such amazing energy. Rook f8. Maybe Alexi had slightly better defenses throughout, but already he's in huge trouble. Now knight takes h7. Every single move, Arjun exposes and exploits the drawback of Alexi's last move. And now in comes the bishop, Robert. He doesn't let Black breathe at all.
No, look at this. The rook on h8, it pins the knight on h7, but you can't pile up pressure on it. The knight on d4 looks good, but the attack is too strong. And after the move, queen to b6, it's, well, I want to continue my attack. He says, wait, there's a tactic here. Bishop takes e7. The king can't take on e7 because queen g5 slides over with check. The bishop is lost. So instead of taking that bishop on e7, Sarana tried his best to take this pawn on b2. But Danya, here, the tactics continued to favor Arjun.
Indeed, and at this point, Arjun divided the board into 2 segments. He said, I don't care about anything that's on the queen side. All I care about are all of these pieces. I'm going to close my eyes to what's happening on the left side of the board and crash through on the right side. E takes f5. Now rook takes f5, sacrificing the rook on a1 with check. Now it would be a grave mistake to return to f1 because of bishop d4 check. I blundered this during the commentary. Arjun did not, and he walks fearlessly out to f2. At this point, the rook is untouchable due to checkmate. In fact, the threat against the f7 pawn is totally unstoppable, and it's decisive. Alexi, bishop d4 check. He grabs the bishop and tries to make a run for it, but Robert, the pursuit of the king is one of the most exciting parts of this game. Arjun does so expertly and precisely.
Yeah, he starts with the queen h4 check. The king has to run to c7. And then their problems continue because knight b5 comes in with check. The king ran to b6. And after rook takes d7, rook to f8. Here it looks like White's king is in danger because queen f1 with rook f2, these ideas in combination will threaten checkmate against the white king. You can't take the rook on f8 because then you lose your queen on h4. So what Arjun does here is he finds a way out. He goes, rook takes b7 check. If the king were to take on b7, e7. In comes the queen to e7 to take this pawn on a7 with checkmate on a7 or c7 to follow. So unfortunately for black, you can't take the rook. You slide up to a5. And here, Danya, he finds not quite a checkmating finish, but something that was sufficient for an overwhelming advantage.
Indeed, he takes on a7. He goes back to b7, just showing the extent of his tactical domination. After king a5, now in this position, there was a crazy idea with knight takes f8, sacking the queen and delivering this checkmate. Beautiful, but completely impractical. Arjun finds the practical option. He drops the queen back to e1, forcing liquidation and a transformation into a completely winning endgame. White is up a ton of material. He's got 2 pieces for the rook. He's also got a bunch of pawns. Everything is collapsing. Black's king is still checkmated. And to make matters worse, Alexei, forgetting that the rook on f8 is hanging, not that anything else would have helped, Arjun says, thank you very much. And he just takes everything, takes f8, takes e6, and the next couple of moves were futile. Arjun activating the king, final king sally, and after king b3, a very fitting final position. Black's king will be checkmated inevitably with rook b5.
And it was
an incredible game. So much action packed in 33 moves.
Yeah, I was going to say what a blistering finish it was, but it was that way throughout the entire game. And it's all started in the opening. The Grand Prix attack not played too often at the highest level, but this is why we need to study our lines. There's that bishop b5, bishop c4, not allowing black to counter against that bishop so easily. And so that was a nice win from Arjun Naroditsky, and that is your Coinbase rapid recap. So, Danya, I mean, what a wonderful game that was. Unfortunately for Arjun Naroditsky, 2 weeks in a row, he's had some great games, some big wins, but he has not made it his way to the final 8.
Welcome to the Rapid Chess Championship. Only 8 qualify, and it's so incredibly competitive. It really comes down to the wire. It comes down to crazy stalemates. And as we look at our bracket, David Anton is going to be counting his lucky starts, and he's going to try to make it count. He faces some guy named Hikaru Nakamura in the first round. And remember, there's only one rapid game. Anything can happen. You certainly don't want to miss the action tomorrow.
No, and if we look across the bracket, we have 8 great players. Alexei Dreyev, we're complimenting him many times today. He gets to play against Fabiano Caruana, that's in the bottom right-hand side of the screen. There's an all-Russian battle between Peter Svidler and Daniil Dubov. We didn't really see much of Dubov today, but he was able to sneak into the field, Danya, and just because he's the 7th seed, that doesn't mean that he can't win against the competition that includes, on the other side, the bottom left, Wesley So, and once again, David Paravian.
Paravian qualifying for the 2nd time in a row. He's such a good rapid player, very practical. I was critical of his opening choices, but hey, it gets the job done, and we'll see how far he can get tomorrow.
Yes, well, 8 players will vie for the big prize because there's quite a deal of prize money at stake in addition to the Grand Prix points. So you know that Hikaru Nakamura is the top seed. He'll look to take home, what is it, $7,000 about, something like that, $7,500. So there's quite a lot at stake for first place. The people who finish 5th through 8th still get $1,000 and those Grand Prix points as the season in the Rapid Chess Championship continues. So Danya, I don't know what else there is to say before tomorrow continues the fun that we saw today.
Another absolutely epic day kicking off the 2nd weekend at the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. This has been incredible. These 3.5 hours, they literally flew by. We had stalemates, crazy attacks, qualifications, photo finishes, everything we could possibly ask for. So as you said at the start, Robert, if anybody had weekend plans before that, we hope that they are permanently scrapped for the next couple of months.
For sure, because the Rapid Chess Championship will be a weekly event. It is so much fun, full of wild surprises, stalemates when about to promote some pawns, losing on time and completely winning positions. That and all the brilliant tactics we saw from Arjun Naroditsky and much, much more. You will not want to miss tomorrow's knockout. 8 players will vie for that first place prize and the Grand Prix points. But for now, Donnie and I will sign off. We hope you enjoyed your stay here at chess.com. And tomorrow, the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase will continue.